Give me one sec. And then I'll double check the website to make sure it's going before we start. Okay. We're live.
Hello, everyone. I'm Senator Katie Fry-Hester, proud to represent District 9, which is Howard and Carroll County. I'm here to welcome you to our first hearing of the interim of the Joint Committee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Biotechnology. I'm joined today by special guests who will be speaking with us, committee members, and I want to start by introducing my co-chair, Delegate Pat Young. Delegate Young, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Senator Hester. This is my first opportunity to chair the Joint Committee from the House side. This committee did an amazing job getting these issues brought to the forefront in the Senate and the House. Just proud to be here and to continue the work that you all started last year.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you as my co-chair. I also want to give a special shout out to now Senator Jackson, who was my co-chair when he was in the House. He obviously is now a senator, and he will remain part of the committee, although he couldn't make it here today. We also have several other members of the House and Senate. I'd like to welcome my good colleague, Senator Susan Lee, who's been a pioneer in this area for a very, very long time. Thank you, Senator Lee, for being here. And we also have Delegate Rosenberg, Kelly, and also Delegate Feldmark. Did I miss anybody? Great. Okay.
Did you get Delegate Kelly too?
I did get Delegate Kelly. Do you
okay, good. Okay. Got to take care of my District 16 colleague.
It's hard. We got so many boxes open. Well, today we've got a great slate of speakers, including MSDE, DoIT, the Vermont Agency of Digital Services, and I'm particularly excited to also have the private sector and the nonprofit sector with us today. The National Cybersecurity Center has developed tools for us as legislators and our staff, and they'll be briefing us. They're the last on the agenda, but you got to stick around because they've got some great tools specifically for us state legislators. I also wanted to provide just a bit of context before we dive in with our first speaker from Homeland Security. The Maryland Cybersecurity Council, which many of you are on, and is chaired by our wonderful Attorney General, Brian Frosch, is undertaking a study this year, doing a comprehensive kind of assessment of cybersecurity in the state of Maryland. And we're collaborating with them. And so the interim committee hearings and the testimony delivered throughout the interim will help to inform that study as well. The Maryland Cybersecurity Council is doing this study with the help of several other organizations, in particular, let's see, Ben Yellen at the Maryland Center for Homeland Security. Do I have that right? Maryland Center for Homeland Security. We'll be directing the whole project, and then we've got 3 specific tasks. The first task is on governance of cybersecurity in the state of Maryland, and that will be led by Greg Von Lehman of UMD. Task number 2 is looking at state agencies and what our state is doing to help leverage best practices and comparing them to other states. And that will be led by our state CISO, Chip Stewart. And then task 3 is a lot like task 2, but it's looking at local governments. And Mako is leading this, and Senator Lee has volunteered to help that task 3 as well. And finally, of course, we've all heard so much about critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. And there is an entire another study that is going on critical infrastructure that the Maryland Council is doing. And so this study will not address that breadth. We're trying to limit it down. And so that work is already underway, and we expect a final report at the middle of December. So with that, I would like to open it up to our first speaker. Last year, we were joined by CSEA to talk about some of the resources that the federal government made available to the state, particularly in preparedness and risk assessments. And CSEA has continued in that same vein, rolling out the .gov.gov initiative to provide another tool for the states. And I won't give any spoilers, but today we're going to hear a little bit about how CISA is assisting the states. Sorry, that's really hard to say 3 times fast. And broader questions for you as well. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome a local celebrity here, Mr. Franco Cappa, Senior Security Professional with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, back to the Joint Committee. Welcome back, Mr. Cappa.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite, opportunity actually to talk to the group here. So it's exciting for sure. Richard, can you bring up the? Actually, let's start with the CISA.gov website just to provide some context here. So yeah, perfect. This one here. So just for maybe everybody's probably aware what CISA does, but just briefly, so the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency is the designated agency, federal agency responsible for protecting critical infrastructure from both the physical and cyber perspective. That's why, it's actually embedded in our name, if you will. If you, this is the CISA.gov website, and I'm pointing to this page just because it's there's a wealth of information here. And if you look in the top middle, if you will, you will see 4 pillars. The first one on the left is cybersecurity. Then you have infrastructure security, emergency communication, and national risk management. These are the 4 basic functions, if you will, that CISA is responsible for. So today, and of course, my role is in cybersecurity, but just to briefly explain what the others do. So infrastructure security is your physical security role, if you will, that we have. Emergency communication is your 911 and other national, let's say, communications needed when there's an emergency, and our, let's say, risk advisory function, because CISA is the National Risk Advisory. So, and this is done by the National Risk Management Center. So these are the 4 primary functions, if you will. We'll go back to this, website later on, but for now, just to give at least some background, maybe everybody already is aware of what we do, but I thought it was probably important to do that. So let's go to now to the .gov website. So this is, an exciting initiative, and because CISA was already responsible for the .gov domain, in the sense that technically we were maintaining or supporting the domain. We were monitoring the domain, so all the feeds, come to our central watch center, if you will. So it's not that we were not responsible for this before, but now we've been given also responsibility to manage the .gov domain, which is exciting in the sense that that presents some opportunities, especially for smaller municipalities, local governments, and all that. So if you look at this page, and it should be easy to remember .gov, to know more about this initiative. So on April 27th, there was an interesting announcement, an important announcement actually, which is that in this fiscal year, so between April and September this year, then we don't know if it will be extended, but for now we can only talk, of course, about the current fiscal year. Basically, we will support organizations that are eligible for to transition to a .gov domain at no cost. So, which is, of course, great news. So just to simplify also the way actually organizations can take advantage of this opportunity. Just to briefly explain, so it's not just the fact that it will give some uniformity in a way that we advertise, local governments or state governments or government type organizations in general. So it's more consistent, but it provides also with some technical advantages, if you will. For one thing, for example, since we maintain the domain, we also maintain the DNS. And without getting too much into the technical aspect, the DNS is like the white pages, if you will, of the internet. So all the agencies within DNS the .gov, will be maintained by this DNS, this capability. And the way that because we have it under our control now, we have a better way to monitor, to understand, and also to provide protections. So this is definitely a great advantage for all those organizations that will decide to take advantage of this opportunity. Richard, if you could please click in under requirements. It's in the middle of the page, still on April 27th. Does it say requirements? Yeah, perfect. That one. Thank you very much. So this is actually, it provides actually some sort of a Q&A, if you will, meaning that there is quite a few questions already answered here. So this gives some information about eligibility, how it is structured. So, what we suggest being, we are trying to, again, as I said, being consistent so that every, department within a municipality or a county, whatever, let's say, can be identified in a similar way. But of course, we also understand that there might be some need for exceptions. So in any case, if you, Richard, could scroll down a bit the page, you will see it's pretty lengthy. If you just keep scrolling, please. So again, it provides us some general information. It provides us some historical facts, but also provides, let's say, instructions about how to do, what to apply for, and so on and so forth. So get specific requirements, and there is a wealth of information here. I definitely recommend looking into this website to understand, because most of the answers, the questions are actually answered here. Well, thank you, Richard. So let's go now to, let's go back to the previous page.
Oh.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so from this page, you can land to whatever you need to do in order to apply for, for the .gov. But also there is another page. So the second link I sent you, Richard, the GitHub. Yeah, perfect. So we also maintain under the GitHub, the data that we collect, procedures and all that, instructions and all that. So this is also where you can find, for example, information about all the different municipalities, state, and organizations that are eligible that have, let's say, sign up, for the .gov. And you will see also exceptions for if you need to transition, if you already have that, but you need to transition and all that. The third link that I have provided, that actually gives some, if you see here, it's a long list, but basically these are all the, we maintain these on a daily basis. So, and then on the GitHub, a web capability, you see all the different municipalities. This is nationwide, it's not Maryland, right? But that have requested, access that are moving to the .gov domain. So this is also good source of information, let's say, to understand, the progress. For example, I think yesterday there was probably 21 more that requested, access. I don't have yet. I know that at some point I was asking for information specific to Maryland, Delaware, and maybe the Virginia, so the surrounding, states. I don't have that captured yet, but it's actually here. So I will, let's say, help with gathering that information to at least understand, what your neighboring states are also doing. But again, so most of the information is actually available online. I want again, stress the importance of this initiative. First of all, again, between now and September, you as a municipality have the opportunity to enroll into these at no cost, and that's already a great advantage. Then you have again the support that we can provide, and should something happen, and God forbid, it is the case, but we don't understand that things happen. It could be a ransomware, it could be something else. It's easy for us to support an organization also where we have a better, understanding of what's happening, what's going on. So a number of advantages that I'm saying by doing that. And I'm not trying to make it, maybe too simplistic, but there's going to be some effort required, but for the most part, as I'm saying, it should be pretty easy for organizations to move to the .gov, domain. I'm going to pause here for a moment now before we proceed. Any questions, Senator or anybody else?
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'd just like to jump in here and remind all of our participants, if you're not the speaker, to please mute yourself so that we get a clear, we can hear more clearly. So I'll kick it off with a question, and then I'll look around. Ricky, if you could take us back off screen share, I can see if anybody else has a question. But I was just curious if public schools were eligible to go to .gov.
So I'm pretty sure that public schools might also be eligible, but definitely we can specific questions that the folks actually that are responsible for the .gov initiative are extremely responsive. So if you have some specific questions, let's say that your constituent or your working group has, I'll be happy to actually facilitate that discussion and connect you directly to the source of the information, if you will. So it might be easy maybe just to collect that internally within your working group and then send it over. So but I'm assuming that by looking at some of the website that schools are also eligible. But again, I don't want to answer, because there is I'm not the one that say that is vetting that process, right? So I'm just the helping the organization in making sure that organizations are aware, that municipalities especially are aware of what's available out there. So I apologize, I cannot say yes or no, but that has to be done by the people that are designated for that. Sorry for that. But
that's quite all right. And we can certainly compile a list of more technical questions.
Please.
Does anybody else have a question while we have Franco here with us today they would like to ask? If not, I have another one, but I want to give committee members a chance. Okay. I'm not seeing any, so I guess I'll just keep plowing ahead. In addition to all the work that you've done on .gov, last time you joined our committee, you spoke specifically about the free audits offered by DHS and CSEA for the state. And we've heard a little bit today on what tools are available. Could you is there a way that you could kind of summarize what tools are available? Is it still everything that was available last year? And how would, let's say, Howard County government, like how would they go about getting some of this free support from the federal government?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And Rich, I'm going to ask you again for your assistance here. If you could bring up the CSEA.gov website, it would just make it easier, let's say, to show people. Yeah. So if you go to CSEA.gov website, that is where you find the majority of the information. So if you click under cybersecurity, so that one, yeah, you see these are some of the quick links. But then if you go to the Cyber Resource Hub, the bottom left, that is actually where you see most of the capabilities that we provide. And just a reminder that what we provide, it's provided at no cost for organizations. You can see here, probably you can see that in the sense that you don't know what it is, but some of the assessments of the, are actually non-technical in nature. So they are designed to help organizations understanding and assessing the security posture from a higher level perspective, meaning we always say a 10,000-foot view. So for example, the CRR, the Cyber Resilience Review, the 4 or 5, down the list here, that one it's not technical in nature. It's more governance and let's say procedural related. So do you have a plan? Do you have a program? Do you have the right folks? Do you have the right organization in place? So this is, not technical. So normally for this one, we talk to CIOs, CISOs, the C-suite, of organizations, and therefore municipalities, state, or local governments in any case. And then, of course, we have more technical ones. So like, for example, the vulnerability scanning, the first one listed or the second one listed there, that's basically where we can show the vulnerabilities that are there in the publicly available, let's say, to threat actors, or anyway, people that are outside the organization. Basically, this is what we do. We scan the systems that are facing the internet. So normally it's like web pages and all that, right, of organizations, or even sometimes other systems, and just, not to mention the Colonial Pipeline in our issue, but, there was a forgotten VPN concentrator with the password that had been compromised before. It was basically out there that they didn't know. So in this way, we can also show what's there, what's, let's say, vulnerable. And of course, whatever we provide, it's provided at no cost. And then there is more, even more technical assessments. If you go scroll down, Richard, to the almost the bottom of the page, there is, for example, the what we call the VADR, the Validated Architectural Design Review. That's again, we assess your network, how it is designed, the traffic, the segmentation, and so on and so forth. And in between, there is, all sorts of other capabilities. But in this website, you can find most of the information. And Richard, sorry again to ask you to go back one page. If you just go back. So here you have, more links that will take you to other capabilities. For example, in the middle of the page, you don't have to click on that one, but you have cybersecurity training and exercise. For example, on the training, if you have a .gov email, you have access to free training for thousands of courses, even certifications that are available at no cost through FedVT, which is again a tool that can be accessed with a .gov email. Another advantage of having a .gov email, and then exercises, so to make sure that you are prepared if something happens. And again, you see there's tons of other information here. There is one pages that we provide. Many times people ask me, so tell me 10 things that I should do, from a cybersecurity perspective. And these one pagers provide that. So these are essential activities that, for example, a cybersecurity leader should perform, regardless to the size of organization, to make sure that you're covering the bases, right? So everything gets in here. And then, of course, ransomware. If you go to the main page, Richard, please. Yeah, you see, reduce the risk of ransomware. There is, specific information there. There's guides, there is material, there is alerts, and then the different emergency directive that we came up with. So there is a wealth of information. I definitely recommend looking into these. And then to answer the question about how to request these, it's very simple. I'm your point of contact. So the county who's interested, they can reach out to me. I'm assigned to Maryland. Right now, hopefully we'll bring someone on board that is assigned just to Maryland. I cover a larger area. We are actually hiring for that. But so you contact me and I can help you or direct you, to all the different capabilities and work with you to a strategy that will help you, let's say, moving forward, to define what is needed, what's the best course of action, and so on and so forth. I hope it helps.
That was very, very helpful. I think we'll send out the link to the .gov and the link that you just shared with us, and maybe your email so that folks can get in touch with you. Any other questions from members?
And let me repeat that everything that is provided at no cost. Nothing, and I always say no cost versus free because it's taxpayer money, right? So we all pay for it. So, right. But it's there, it's in the budget, it's available. Take advantage of it.
We certainly will, Franco. Just one final question as we transition though. The tools and services that you are no cost. Let's say that there's an upgrade that's required. Is there federal money available, actual cash specifically for cybersecurity upgrades. And maybe if you could just send us that also, we could share that with our members.
There are some grants that, usually the grants are through FEMA.
Okay.
Oh, did I lose you? Oh, no. Okay, so usually they are through FEMA, but for some reason, I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but it says the internet connection is not strong enough. But anyways, hopefully you can hear me. But so there are grants that are available. They're funneled through actually state. So I definitely suggest reaching out to and Chip, should have the information, and then more probably to come. So even just these the no cost for the .gov, some of the we just want to make sure that services and capabilities are available. So we want to make it easier for everybody. So and grants are also designed for that. There will be more grants, let's say, for cybersecurity.
I do see that we have a question from Delegate Rosenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To what extent, perhaps you've answered this already and I missed it, but to what extent do we have this sort of preventive maintenance already in Maryland in terms of the security of our system? How would you evaluate Maryland's current system?
Yeah, so let's say, let me maybe clarify also one aspect. So we are no regulatory organization, right? So we do not go out and assess compliance and all that. So we are on a voluntary basis. So organizations reach out to us and we help organizations. We don't have, let's say, it's not part of a mandate to go and ask for organization, how they're doing and all that. So we do analyses that are, nationwide. So, and of course, we protect the information that we collect under something which is called the PCII Act, which is the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information Act, which was established in 2002 to protect information collected by DHS. So we cannot disclose, let's say, who do we work with and all that, unless the organization decides to do it themselves. But again, just it's important to understand that we are not regulatory, so we cannot go out and, let's say, initiate the conversation. That must come from the organization itself. So public or private, they should reach out to us and then we'll be able to work and we protect the information under this PCI Act. Does that answer your question? I'll probably going to know more about it, but I cannot disclose the details, but that's the way it works.
I understand. Thank you.
You bet.
And Delegate Rosenberg, I think that's part of the purpose of the study the Maryland Cybersecurity Council is undertaking. So we should make sure to get you those questions. And if you want to drill deeper in anywhere, now's the time to add the questions to the work that we're doing. Okay.
And if I may, actually, we also work, we have regular meetings with the Maryland Homeland Security, office. So with Pete, there, and with Pete. So we work, let's say, at different levels, or with the MCAC, with the fusion centers. So we try to work with whomever has, a stake, if you will, at the state level, but also with, single individual municipalities. But I'll be happy, let's say, to be connected to, like this working group or other working groups for that matter, that have, let's say, the mission of, protecting critical infrastructure.
Well, thank you again, Franco. We'll probably see you a third time next year, but really appreciate it and we'll follow up offline.
Sounds good. Yeah, again, please do reach out to me.
Franco, can I ask you one last question?
Please.
Senator Lee. Listen, I know CSEA is assisting government entities, but with critical infrastructure being about 75% private, I believe it's privately owned, are you also assisting and providing advice to those critical infrastructures that are, semi-private? And are you using the NIST guidelines to assist them?
Yeah, absolutely.
With the guidance? And how much of that are you doing right now with critical infrastructures?
Yeah, so great question. And yes, we work with both the public and private sectors or organizations. So, for example, in Maryland, there is a large presence of pharmaceutical, right? Last year with some of them were involved with what used to be called the Operation Warp Speed. Now under the new administration is called COVID-19 Federal Response. but it's the same, let's say, effort. So, definitely, we try to work, try to address, especially looking from a risk perspective, right? So water, for example, it's another major one that we are looking at. And then even with water, some it's private, some is public. But again, it goes back to what I was saying before, that unfortunately, or fortunately, we are not regulatory, so we can only work with whomever reaches out to us. So that is, let's say, that's why we try to, as much as possible, do an outreach to help organizations understand that we are there. And one last thing, if I may actually, Richard, take advantage of your kindness and bring up the CISA.gov website. And I know that my time is up, so I'll be quick. But just one last thing maybe that's important to present here. If you just scroll up a little bit. Top right, report cyber issues. So this is available in all pages in CISA.gov. If you scroll down here, you can, if you are public or private, as long as you are, let's say, a critical infrastructure organization belonging to the 16 sectors, you can request assistance. So report an incident, and there are 3 ways to do that. If you want to scroll down, you see one is click on the report incident, that opens up a form. No need to go there. That's okay. So you fill up a form, or you can use the telephone number listed below, or you can send an email, the next one. So all these are available again for critical infrastructure. Or you can report phishing, you can upload, malware, report, share indicator compromises. So we work with both public and private. So we support both public and private. And of course,
include healthcare facilities. I know that they've been under attack, hospitals and healthcare facilities, both private and public. Yep. And I know Delegate Kelly's been very involved in the healthcare system, and I know that some of those infrastructures have been attacked. So do you give guidance to them too?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've been working with, and we work also along with the FBI. So we are both under the Presidential Directive 41. There are 3 agencies, 3 federal agencies that are actually on point for federal response perspective. One is CISA, one is FBI, the third one is ODNI. But of course, ODNI, you will never work directly with them because that's for intelligence. But most organizations will work with either CISA or FBI or together. And we shared that responsibility with FBI. So when there is something, we are made aware, they're made aware. And again, depending on what it is that is actually required, because we have different, let's say, missions. So the FBI is on point for investigations, attribution, whereas CISA is on point for what we call mitigation. So help organizations going back to business as quick as possible. So these
do you have regional directors too, Franco?
We do have a regional director, and his name is Bill Ryan. He's actually the Region 3, where also Maryland is part of. It's actually headquartered in Philadelphia. So he sits in the Philadelphia office. But I'll be happy to bring him in a meeting if it's helpful for your organization also to know the regional director, let's say, who's actually, and he covers, of course, the physical and cyber advisors and all that aspect. So, and to be honest, we work together, myself and the cybersecurity advisors, and the protective security advisors, we work together. So cyber or physical, we tend anyway to work together, same as we do also with the FBI, as I was saying before, from information perspective.
Thank you so much, Franco.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Great questions. I'm sure we could talk to you all day, but unfortunately, we have to go on. So if anybody on the call has additional questions, please get them to committee staff, and we'll send a follow-up email and then distribute the answers to everybody. And I just want to mention that we have been joined by Senator Rosapepe. So Senator Rosapepe, thank you for being here as well. We're going to move on now to the Department of Information Technology. Of course, we couldn't have one of these discussions without hearing from about Maryland cybersecurity initiatives without Secretary Leahy and Chip Stewart, our State Chief Information Security Officer. As we start this kind of conversation, I think it's really important that we understand the work the state is currently doing and what initiatives the department has on its docket for the upcoming year. So here to tell us more about what's going on in the state and where they see the state headed and how we can work together to protect the state system is Secretary Leahy and State CISO Chip Stewart. Welcome back.
Well, Senator Hester, thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Chair Young and other members of the committee. I'm Mike Leahy, Secretary of the Department of Information Technology, and to my right is Chip Stewart, the State Chief Information Security Officer. As I said, I'm really thrilled and excited to be part of this process working with you. It's part of the fun things we get to do in our job, to think ahead and make sure we are implementing best practices and working with the folks that are most responsible to the citizenry. So thank you. As I implied, security is at the forefront of our activities and the mandate from the Hogan administration. And effectively, we are looking for ways to be proactive and at the same time implement what we would call consolidated and standardized, centralized processes, an enterprise approach, if you will. And we believe that that is the way to move forward on a number of fronts. First, if you have a single centralized methodology that is consistently enforced and following the NIST framework and standards, there is very little opportunity for folks to go off on detours and frolics and do their own thing. The second piece is by standardizing those processes, you need less overhead and less expense in terms of maintaining and monitoring a system. And secondarily, because of the likelihood that it's not if, it's when something is going to occur that rises to the level of requiring a response, we build in centralized methodologies to respond and to mitigate on an enterprise basis. So it's interesting because last year, Deloitte and Nasio did a cybersecurity survey, which has a number of questions, and I'll be happy to get a copy to anyone on the committee that would like to see it. And they basically came to the same conclusions I've just stated. Over 3/4 of state CIOs believe a consolidated, centralized approach to security is the best methodology and set of best practices currently available to us. And in this past year, Do It has been very active, as has Mr. Stewart's Office of Security Management. We have formalized and published an updated Maryland IT Security Manual, and we are publishing security-related policies almost monthly, and making certain that we are implementing things effectively and efficiently. And the Cybersecurity Coordinating Council that is chaired by Mr. Stewart has also been invaluable because we speak to the folks responsible for security implementation in the units of government, in the executive branch, in the major agencies. And our most important activity, aside from the day-to-day protection of systems that we're undertaking right now, and Chip can talk to you about this a bit more, is we are undertaking an assessment of the security and data held and maintained in various agencies. And you say, that's rather odd, you're going to look at the data too. And the reason is we're going to do the trust but verify, but over time, there's a thing called data rot, where you end up with lots of data that's redundant or obsolete, or it is trivial. Yeah, it's trivial. Thank you, Chip. And because of that, folks lose track of data sometimes. So knowing where data is makes it easier for us to know how to protect it. And that also gives the agencies some insight into what they should be thinking about, not only in terms of the security of their data, but how they're using it for their business practices. So we are looking at ways to minimize data, which also simplifies the amount of data that has to be covered under any security protocol. And I could go on for hours, but Chip is the expert, so I'm going to turn it over to him. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Secretary Leahy. Thank you, Chair Frey-Hester, Chair Young, and members of the council. I framed out my responses in alignment with the questions that were asked. I'm going to try to go relatively quickly, but I have a lot of content. I want to make sure to leave time for questions and make sure to keep us on schedule. So the background of cyber preparedness and governance in Maryland has really changed in the past almost 2 years now with the governor's Cyber Defense Initiative. That was the executive order that created my role, the Office of Security Management, and the Maryland Cybersecurity Coordinating Council. The scope of the office is the executive branch of state government. So excluded from the scope are counties, judicial and legislative branch. And I'm going to speak a little bit about what we're doing. Some of it is going to be a bit of a recap from last year when we met, the last meeting, I think, in December. And some of it will be new. One of the activities that we talked about last time we met was the transition of the Security Operations Center from a third-party vendor to an in-house SOC. SOC's the acronym for Security Operations Center. One of the advantages to that is the agility and flexibility of using in-house resources without having to modify contracts or have the vendors build what we need. In addition, true 24/7 in-house capabilities. Most security operations centers are focused solely on detection. Some start to kind of delve into protection or response, but the sweet spot for security operations centers typically is that defensive position. They have sensors, they log alerts, they notify the people who then have to go do the work. We're trying to build something a little bit different here. So we're focused much more on the outcomes than on the just pure alerting. We're doing a lot of proactive identification and detection of what we call shadow IT. That's IT that isn't centrally managed or part of the enterprise planning. Most of these systems, if they're in the shadow IT realm, tend to not have the same protections in place. So, pulling from some of the recent breach stories, you might have a system where multi-factor authentication isn't configured, which leaves it vulnerable to somebody's password being compromised and the system gets attacked. It might not be properly patched or might not have all the appropriate patching, things like that. So we're finding those both as they're connected to the state's networks and when agencies put things in third-party systems. So like Amazon Cloud, for example, we have mechanisms to detect those. So we're doing a lot of that proactive identification of assets. We're also doing a lot more proactive blocking. So in the protect space, we're using the signals generated from the Security Operations Center to feed back automatically into the protection of the network. So this is, again, an agility and speed of execution item that I think is very effective. That information sharing regarding the signals that we're receiving extends to other organizations. So we're partnering with other states, MSISAC, to make sure that we're sharing that intelligence that we create and also consuming the intelligence that they create, which I think makes all of us stronger. And then, all of the typical detection capabilities are in-house as well. Yeah, back to the intelligence, doing a lot of gathering through dark web tools and other capabilities to find potential breaches. For example, if a vendor's website were breached and Maryland.gov emails were on it, this enables us to identify the passwords used and force password changes because people sometimes don't have great password habits. I think this was the cause of one of the more recent very public breaches in the commercial space, where the passwords were compromised on a commercial website and then used to break into the commercial entity. Again, the distribution, and again, the big thing with this is that speed, right? The thing we need to focus on, and I'll speak more in this about innovation, is how do we reduce the amount of time between when the bad guys take their first action and when they take their final action? And how do we get in between those and break that chain? And then another interesting initiative that we've been pushing forward on is takedowns of lookalike websites, sites that purport to be state or other Maryland government entity websites that are intending to do phishing or fraud. So that's been another significant initiative that we've undertaken. And that's been everything from county emails to all sorts of other phishing type of websites. And we've had some pretty great success with that. In terms of innovative and technological approaches, again, anything to reduce cycle time, which is why we put a big focus on a capability called SOAR. So SOAR stands for Security Orchestration Automation Response. In business terms, that's robotic process automation. And the whole idea behind that is if we don't have to have a person in the chain, we can move it much more quickly. For cybersecurity needs of local governments, I think at a high level, the needs are the same. The need for that proactive detection, as Franco mentioned, the ability to know what your attack surface is and to have a good handle on your posture. The needs are the same everywhere. But I think in terms of scale, using the state as a mechanism to take that intelligence and pull it in is a potential opportunity for collaboration that has a transformational and meaningful impact. Again, for the cost of cybersecurity, the cost goes up the further into the life cycle you try to add security. One of the things you've likely heard me say in the past, built-in is less expensive than bolt-on. If you try to add security at the end, you're having to do a bunch of rework. It's very expensive and typically not as effective. I think when you consider the total cost of ownership, the strong cybersecurity on the front end, the built-in approach winds up being a cost-saving measure. The framework assures availability, helps ensure customer confidence, and prevents the very expensive cybersecurity incident response activities that we all hope to avoid. I think I answered all the questions. Again, I tried to go very quickly, so I apologize for the speed and cadence there. But with that, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Chip. That was excellent. Looking around, does anybody have questions for Secretary Leahy or Chip Stewart? Senator Lee.
Secretary Leahy, thank you so much for all your leadership and work in keeping our state safe from cyber attacks. And Chip, thank you for your great expertise. I just wanted to ask you, many times it's cyber hygiene or it's hygiene that gets us in trouble and that enables ransomware to sneak into our system. How much are your resources or your priorities going towards cyber hygiene? And do you have adequate funding to be able to carry that out, or do you need more help from us?
Oh, I'll take that hot potato first. If it were up to me, I think I could name a half dozen things we would love to do that are expensive. And so it becomes a function of setting priorities. And as Chip said, putting our SOC from an 8-hour-a-day, 5-day-a-week methodology to 24/7 and looking at using robotic process automation to give us an insight into this massive flow of data that we might not have if we're reliant on people looking at everything are two huge steps that we've undertaken. And what comes next, I think, is going to be very dependent on what the threat matrix starts to evolve into. And as Chip said, how we make certain that we can respond quickly so that most of the incidents folks enter but don't act immediately. So if we can discover their entry and then preclude them from taking any malicious action, we are far ahead of the game. And a great deal of that, as he said, comes down to designing security in at the beginning. So we've done a number of things here at Do It. We've changed our intake process for all IT, that now it has to meet the security requirements prior to a new procurement. And if we're talking about a new system, it has to meet CHIPS requirements before we sign off on a new system. So yes, I'd love to have more funding, and I suspect I will have lots of things that Chip tells me we could use very effectively. But again, a great deal of this is we've undertaken so much in this last year. I want to make sure that we indeed are not utilizing technology that may be outdated in a year or two because of the change of threats we're seeing. Chip, you want to add anything?
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to thank you so very much for all your work you're lending to the localities, because they are the targets now of a lot of the cyber attacks, the local entities. So I thank you for helping me pass my bill this year to provide voluntary assistance to localities. Because a lot of times they don't even know what their own vulnerabilities are, nor do they have the resources to be able to identify it and take proactive action to prevent and deter cyber attacks. So thank you. I think it's not going to solve everything, but I think it's a good step to use your talent in your office, Chip, and you, Secretary, to help the locality. So thank you so much. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. And the other piece of that you added is, most attacks are because we attempt to be helpful. So we're open to phishing, or we are open to people being sloppy with their cyber hygiene, as you put it. So we're putting a significant importance on folks being properly educated to the risks that they're facing and to incorporate that into their cyber hygiene.
Yeah, Chip? Yeah, I would agree. I think the only real dichotomy I see with that is that the cyber hygiene is the base, and things like cybersecurity awareness and training are so important. And if it gets to the point where someone gets a phishing email, that means a bunch of things have failed in front of it. That means that it got through a mail server, that the antivirus scanner didn't pick it up. The user clicked on it. The firewall let it out to that bad site. So I think the hygiene and what's required and what hygiene consists of today is far more than it was just a few years ago.
Absolutely.
The awareness and training is a big part of it, but I think the IT group has tremendous responsibility in maintaining the hygiene for everyone by making sure that the bad guys are going to be bad guys no matter what. We want to do everything we can before it even has an opportunity to hit the user. And I think that that's, again, a big opportunity, and we look forward to raising the collective hygiene of the state.
Thank you very much. I have 4 questions for you guys, but I heard that, Chip. But before I ask my 4 questions, I do want to just give any of the other members an opportunity. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. If another member does have an opportunity, please, raise your little hand function or, flag me down like this. Okay, so I'm going to ask all four and then ask you guys to be as precise as possible in your response. And just picking up on the line of questioning that Senator Lee asked you all, I do feel it's critically important that we help our localities. And so, Senator Lee's bill, excuse me, will go a step in that direction. But my question is about the outreach and how that's actually happening and if you have the staff and the capacity to do what needs to be taken. And so what your plans are to implement Senator Lee's bill. And that leads to my second question, which is, your overall budget. Now, we worked very closely together this year, and I really count you guys as a partner. There were, Senator Lee's bill had been on the docket a couple of times, and so I was thrilled that we got that passed because it was about time. There were several other bills that would have had additional fiscal notes and resources attached. But I'll just point out that the Attorney General in 2017 or 2018 wrote a letter requesting $29 million to upgrade our information technology and our cybersecurity systems. And that was $29 million in 2018. And this year, our state budget went down $1 million. So what is it that we should be spending our money on? Because obviously there's a delta there. So that was my second question. Related to that is a question that came in through the chat about legacy systems. How many legacy systems do we have? And are we, by bolting on, as you said, Chip, by bolting on cybersecurity at the end of these legacy systems, are we essentially throwing good money after bad? And then my final question is, when the governor passed the Defense Act, there was also $5 million in the budget for auditing our state agencies. So I should know this off the top of my head, but I believe there's somewhere around 70 state agencies. I would be curious how many DoIT is working with, because I believe you're not working with all of them. And then out of the ones that you're working with, how many have you audited so far? I'd really like to see us get to 100% auditing by the end of this year. And obviously we have free resources from CSEA, which we could use to do that. So those are the 4 questions I've collected so far.
I'm going to let you jump in and then
I thought those were all questions from the gallery. I was like, well, that's a lot of questions from the gallery. It's more than we normally get. So I'm going to speak to the assessment status. So that is an ongoing activity. I believe that we currently have 5 or 6 that are active right now. And when you're building a program like this, it just takes time to build. I think we are working very diligently to do so. The pandemic certainly slowed our ability and capacity to do that. But I think at this point, we are moving ahead full steam. And again, I can't give you the exact numbers offhand. I'll have to get those for you. I believe when we calculated, I want to say it's 114 units of state government. And of those 114, there are some that are count as one, but we feel like we may have to break down into kind of different size chunks. For example, the Maryland Department of Health has, give or take, 27 local health departments. They don't have responsibility for all of them. In addition to a bunch of boards and commissions that operate with some level of autonomy and independence, in addition to a bunch of very large divisions. So the Department of Health will likely be somewhere around 40 or 50 assessments. Department of Human Services, similar, but not quite as large of a number. But you have a lot of very large organizations with a lot of independent silos. And speaking to cost without saying cost, the cost to do those assessments and manage cybersecurity for those organizations goes down the more you consolidate. With every bit of consolidation that you do, that's one less independent system that's redundant, one less data set that has redundant data, a bunch less people that are focused on way too many things to be effective, that are out there trying to do their best, but it's just, it's too much for 1 or 2 people to run all of the technology required today. So I think the consolidation becomes a huge part of what we'll wind up finding when we look at the zoomed in results and then zoom out quickly. We'll see. I suspect we'll see a pattern with that. Did that answer your assessment status question? Whoever.
Well, and I will just add very quickly to that. Agree completely with what Chip said. I think there are two other issues that I am not certain whether it's more the pandemic or the fact that, as you're aware, Senator, legislation was passed 2 years ago that mandated removal of procurement authority from DO-IT and placing it into the Department of General Services. And because they were responsible for dealing with everything in the pandemic, we have found it very difficult this past year to even acquire talent that we would do contractually, because everything has to go through our intake process, then the procurement process, then the Board of Public Works process. And the Board of Public Works process tends to add 2 to 3 months to every procurement. So when you're attempting to do things agilely and it takes a year to procure anything, there are some significant issues there that we're trying to address by automating various pieces of the assessments. The other side of this that I think is critically important, and Chip alluded to this, is that we don't have the authority to audit anyone. And although we are responsible for maintaining Network Maryland, we can only suggest and cajole to a certain extent what agencies undertake with how they choose to operate their IT. So you'll note that our policies all speak to standards. And although we're in agreement that it would be less expensive and better coordinated if we had a centralized policy, which is what Chip is attempting to create, if other agencies chose to meet the standards a different way, we can't stop them. And part of the difficulty we face is some agencies, in their quest to be independent, will attempt to meet those. And of course, that process takes time. And so if they're not joining us and they're doing their own things, we have to watch both channels at the same time. Adds to Chip's difficulties.
Thank you for pointing that out, Secretary Leahy. You know, that was part of one of the bills that unfortunately didn't pass this year.
Right.
But it's my full intent to make sure that you guys have the authority to audit all state agencies next year.
Well, and we need the resources too, obviously.
Well, I wanted to push back, right, on this question, because I feel like I've asked it a couple times over the past year. So let's say we've got 114 units of state government and we have 5 audits underway. I would really like an answer to how much money or time or staff you need to finish those audits.
Okay, well, they are assessments, they're not audits.
Okay, assessments.
So Chip, I mean, I think it's going to depend. Obviously, the Department of Transportation is going to take far more time and effort than the Department of Aging. But I think Chip can put together a relatively well thought out methodology for how we're approaching this. Happy to share that with you.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great, because I mean, we're on the same team. I know I'm asking hard questions, but that's my job. And so I want to know how many resources you need so we can go to bat for you guys next year. Let me just pause and see if there are other members with questions. I don't see anybody. But I don't want to steal the show either. Okay. So you answered the state agency question.
The
legacy system question, please.
So I think the legacy systems is an interesting question because I think what we've found time and time again, when we start working with an agency, we say, hey, can you give us an inventory of what you have? And they say, absolutely. Then they hand us a list. and then something happens, and we say, "Hey, where did this thing come from?" They say, "Oh, yeah, we didn't put that on the list." So I think there's been a lot of struggling to find those legacy systems, identify them, and ensure that we are addressing them. So I'm trying to explain why I don't have an answer rather than just saying no. I think we have a good handle on a couple of the large legacy systems, but I think the small ones have similar risk.
Well, and I think to a point we've all talked about elsewhere, there is always the dilemma that there is a significant upfront cost with implementing a new system. And if the old system still works, it is far less expensive to kick the question down the road another year. And in an attempt to be frugal, I think a lot of that occurs. So again, as Chip has said, the broader issue today is that a security breach can be far more expensive than the system itself. And so we're incorporating the costs of security added into modernized systems, and more use of the cloud, more use of processes that are data-centric rather than hardware-centric. And I'll push it to Chip, but I'm not going to let him talk, for he'll go on for hours about how we're attempting to implement what is called a zero trust protocol. And it puts far more responsibility on the systems, that requires the capacity to be agile and change them, which many of the legacy systems just don't have today.
Yeah, and you made a comment at the end of your question, a concern about throwing good money after bad. And I don't know if you caught my sly grin when you said that, because that's something I think those are words that are uttered here frequently. We want to be very careful not to just keep throwing good money at this old thing that we're trying to keep alive for no really meaningful reason, except that we don't have the capital budget to deal with it now. So I think that has been one of the things we, at least since I've been here, and I assume since Secretary Leahy has been here, has been a priority, is making sure that as we bring agencies into the enterprise and we consolidate, that we don't throw good money after bad. And if a system needs to be modernized, that we take the time to modernize as we're pulling it in. And that's, that is a huge advantage to some of the SaaS offerings, software as a service offerings, where instead of having to deal with the consistent modernization, that occurs at someone else's expense, and that's just kind of your ongoing cost. So I think what we've seen with a lot of the things we've been doing, the easiest one to talk about is email. The state has not had to do an upgrade to our Gmail system or modernize our Office 365 systems, because we pay somebody else to make sure that that's just always kept up to date. And I think that it's a great strategy for making sure that we don't have that sort of legacy system. To give you the best answer I can for your legacy system question, I think that the assessments will help us uncover and be able to better estimate what that number actually looks like.
Well, and toward that end, there are two other things that I think we have taken great pride in incorporating into looking at these questions. The first is, we're not attempting to just lift and shift what the old system does. We are looking at what people in the agency, what the citizenry and the residents of Maryland need today, and redefine the workflows so that the modern system isn't limited to what was possible 10 or 20 years ago. The second piece of that is there are opportunities to sort of bypass a number of these legacy questions. Chip mentioned the obvious one of using certain software as a service, that the people who provide it modernize it regularly. But the one I'm proudest of that we've done ourselves is the Maryland One Stop portal, which, as you know, we are building to provide not only a search engine for all permits and interaction citizens might have with the state government, and now with some county governments, they're putting their regulatory and land use processes on. But it allows us to use the legacy systems, but have the interface for citizens and for us to be modernized so that the interface is where the security issues arise. We're not going to allow the legacy systems to have direct access to the internet and to Network Maryland. And so that buys us some time, because building a centralized communications portal and methodology allows us more time to decide how to change the workflows within the legacy applications as funds become available.
Well, Secretary Leahy and Chip, I think you did a pretty good job answering my 4 questions I just threw out at you that I've gathered from my colleagues. Just to sum up, it seems like you'd really like to have a centralized system, but you're currently lacking the resources, teeth, and transparency that would be required to move you guys forward. And it doesn't exactly seem fair to me. But I think we really need to give you the tools to, and the policy and the resources to move forward. It seems like it would be good to, first of all, have a list of the agencies and the assessments that are required and the cost of and time frame for those assessments. That would then lead us to a list of the legacy systems that the 114 units of state government have. And once we knew those legacy systems, we could go and move forward with our modernization strategy, which I'm delighted that we have somebody from Vermont, John Quinn, here to talk with us about next. But I mean, does that seem like a logical flow? Like first do the assessments, figure out the legacy systems, and then go to bat for a bigger budget?
Well, I think doing the assessments is critical to anything we do going forward, because we want to verify what folks have told us they're utilizing and they have, and make certain that that's correct, because that's what we're going to have to deal with going forward. And as I've said, I think this is just as much, and in fact more so, a data governance and management issue as a hardware issue.
Right.
The other thing I would suggest is systems become legacy every single day. I don't think we need to wait until we're done all of the assessments.
Right.
To begin, and I don't think that was your suggestion, but I just want to socialize it clearly. I don't think that we need to wait till the last assessment report comes in before we start addressing and planning budget for the legacy systems that need to be upgraded. I think that's this is going to be a continuous activity, and we should consider it to be that. And that's part of the life cycle management for all of these systems.
Right. Well, once again, I just want to stress that we see ourselves here in the legislature as your partners. And I think that getting these lists and some concrete, requests and changes to policy will come back again next year. So thank you guys for being here. I'm just doing a quick scan of my other colleagues. Does anybody have any questions for our CISO or secretary while they are on the hot seat? Okay, seeing none, you guys got off. We really, truly appreciate you being here and having this dialogue. We are recording all this, so you may want to, I know that Secretary Leahy has another commitment shortly, but you're of course welcome to watch the reruns on YouTube. They're fascinating. I've got an intern watching them all this summer. He loves them. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and I'll move on to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, hold on, let's see. So for those of you who know me or watched me for the past 3 years, I often like to ask, what are other states doing? This just serves as a useful baseline and a benchmark for where we are and a sense of direction for where we could go. For example, last year, Delegate Jackson and Senator Jackson and Delegate Krim put forward a training modeled on Texas, how they were doing their training, and probably need to make some tweaks to that, but that was an example from another state. But here today, we're talking about a number of things, and I'm very, very pleased to have the State Chief Information Officer, Mr. John Quinn, here with us from Vermont, the Vermont Agency of Digital Services. We promise we won't ask you as many hard questions as we just asked our secretary. I'd just like to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us by Zoom. We have some slides, I believe, but I'll turn it over to you and my staff can bring up the slides.
Sure. So for the record, I'm John Quinn. I'm the State CIO and Secretary of Digital Services. I could easily boil the ocean and talk about modernization and what Vermont's done around centralization. Listening to Mike and Chip talk, it reminded me of where we were a couple of years ago as far as centralization, and they're on the right path. I think they're certainly taking the right steps, and you're lucky to have them because from my perspective, they're doing a good job. And I interface with Mike Leahy a lot through our National Association of State CIOs. He's a great guy and brings a lot to the conversation and has been helpful in my career. I think Mike and I started around the same time in 2017 in these roles. So we're kind of like freshman brothers, so to speak, in the CIO world. So I was asked by him, Donovan, to come in today and talk about IT modernization and how Vermont approached it. So if you move to the next slide, in 2017, Governor Phil Scott was elected governor of Vermont. At that time, he put forward an executive order to create the Agency of Digital Services, elevate the CIO position to a cabinet level position reporting directly to him, and consolidated or unified all IT operations in the executive branch under the Agency of Digital Services. So no more shadow IT. No agency has an IT person in it that doesn't report to the Agency of Digital Services. What seemed like it may be a little heavy-handed has worked out very well for us, not only in all of us rowing in the same direction, but when it came to the pandemic and being able to shift resources where we needed to prioritize. We moved people from the Agency of Transportation maybe to the Department of Health, or took our best data people and put them on a team to report directly to the Human Services Secretary to give him the data he needed to bring to the governor. So it's worked out very well for us. On the legislative branch side, in 2017, they created a House Energy and Technology Committee for the first time. Before that, it was rather, I don't think there was a real committee of jurisdiction for technology type of things, and it was very dispersed over many agencies or many committees, depending on what the project was. So there's more of a collaborative team approach to how we take these things on. At the same time, a joint IT Information Oversight Committee was created, made up of House and Senate members to really, provide oversight during the off season of the legislature. Our legislature is in session from January until sometime towards the end of May. And at that point, the Joint IT Oversight Committee takes on a monthly meeting where we come in and talk about things like cybersecurity and broadband and, data analytics and how projects are doing and, all the things that you all know and love and ask questions about. Next slide, please. So our goalpost at the end, or our Northern Star, is really around the governor's 3 or 4 priorities here of growing the economy, making Vermont more affordable, protecting the vulnerable, and modernizing state government. As you can imagine, as an IT department, the big one for us is really modernizing state government, but we really fit into each one of these things through our partners that we serve, whether it be the Agency of Commerce or the Agency of Human Services. So we have distributed staff across all of those agencies to ensure that we're able to help our partner agencies succeed in what they do and that they're succeeding in their mission. Our specific agency goals are IT modernization, the Vermonter experience, which is really around digital government, cybersecurity, and IT budget reporting. And as you can imagine, as you know, these four things fit together very tightly, right? I mean, if you're going to offer a service online, you need to be thinking about, what's it replacing? What's the legacy system out there? What are we going to do to protect data of our citizens? And not only the administration, but the legislature needs to know what the true cost of these systems are and how they're going to fund them long term. We need to get out of the operating model of once every 5 years throwing $5 million of capital funds at a project and hoping it survives until the next round 5 years later or 4 years later, and really putting us on an operational budget that makes it more predictable for the legislature and the administration to plan out what we're spending on IT long term and how we're going to fund it long term. Next, please. And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. If you want to break in and ask questions, please feel free. I just put a couple slides together to keep me on track.
I was going to say, I think you're doing a great job, John. I'm scanning to the extent that I can. I don't see any questions yet. So let's finish the slides, and then if members can raise their hands, I'll call on you. Thanks.
Sure. So when we created the Agency of Digital Services, one of the first thing that came up was, okay, there's gonna be a revolt, right? Everyone loves their IT people and their agencies. The IT people need to be connected to those agencies to make sure that they understand what the business process is, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So when we centralized from a command structure, but we didn't pull the people out of the agency. So we left the people embedded to sit next to the business folks and make sure that they understood, like they always had, what was going on and why they were doing things, and to keep that collaboration and communication open. I think that was a big part of our success. And over time, while it made it harder for me as an agency secretary to really bring my people along and to make sure that we're all focused the same direction, because they're very loyal to their agencies that they serve. Over time, as we met weekly, I do a all staff call weekly with all 400 IT people. We talk about where we're going, what we're doing, and how our goals directly impact the goals of the governor and the legislature. The next thing that we took on, and this is over the course of the last 4 years, right? So the next thing we took on was working with our agency IT leads in the agencies and these people used to be the CIOs of those agencies. They're now called IT leads, where they report directly to me or my deputy. We had them start working with the commissioners and secretaries of the agencies to develop project priority lists. We tried to prioritize ourselves as far as what we thought the priorities in state government were from a IT priority list. Too hard to do. We don't know enough about the business. We needed a partner in that. The governor asks us every year, what are the priorities when it comes to IT? So the process that we put together was really working with our agency partners and having each one develop 3 top priorities around IT. And we did this specifically because, if we asked for their whole list, everything would be on it. There would be 10 or 15 projects, and it became extremely difficult to manage. So we took the approach of just give us your top 3 funded, things that need to be funded. And from there, we talk about them as a cabinet. Each agency brings in their top 3, talks about the benefits, what it can do for the citizens, what it can do from a modernization standpoint, how it's going to change their programs, how it's going to make them more efficient and effective. And then as a cabinet, we go through and kind of give our input into which ones we think are the top ones to achieve the governor's overall strategic priorities. And then in a much smaller meeting with me and the governor, his staff, and the Secretary of Administration, we narrow it down to, depending on funds, a smaller subset of the projects to fund in that current fiscal year or in that next fiscal year. The process has worked fairly well for us. The legislative involvement has been very good. They're excited to see that we've started to prioritize, and it's not just each agency's out there advocating in their own committee room for different IT projects without some kind of holistic view of what's going on in the enterprise and how we'll approach it. So while, you know, it's a maturity thing and it takes a while, we are making good progress in that area. When we became an agency, we didn't know how many applications were in state government. We didn't know who was definitely an IT person. Those are all things that we've learned as we've built our agency. We learned that we had over 1,400 applications across our enterprise. Some duplicate, a lot of them had their own contracts. So we've streamlined a lot of those things. And now the Agency of Digital Services holds the IT contracts across state government. We've been able to leverage our buying power, reduce the number of contracts that we have, and reduce the duplication in not only the applications, but eliminate some applications as we go to not only reduce the size of our portfolio, but build a deeper bench around the skill sets that we have to support these things. When I listen to Mike and Chip talk about legacy systems and what's out there and trying to get that involvement from other agencies to get those lists, I can say in Vermont, I can't say in Maryland, that getting other people's IT people to make your priority their priority is very difficult. And even the business people in some situations. So having that ability to say, this has to be done. We are doing this network assessment. We need to understand what we have for equipment out there, how it's configured, what we're doing. It is really, really important. And the correlation between security and centralization is really tight. The one thing that the governor said when we pitched him the idea of the agency was, well, if there's no other reason to do it, security is the best reason of them all. A centralized approach to security is the way to go, and we've proven that over and over. And I have quite a few things to talk about in that area, but I don't want to overstep my time. So we can move on to the next slide. So part of our strategy this year, and one of the new things that we went after in this legislative biennium, this was the first year of the legislative biennium, was setting up an IT modernization fund to start to try to fund some of these things differently. How do you, in a small state like Vermont, the question we always ask ourselves is, how do we get rid of that 50-year-old legacy mainframe system when the cost is $100 million? That's a lot of Vermont. That's a lot of money in Vermont for us to try to figure out. And that's just one system, right? And then we have a DMV system that is $50 million to upgrade, and a healthcare system that is $200 million. So how do we start down this road in a way that gives everyone good insight and transparency into the roadmap on how we're going to move away from legacy technology and into a modern era with digital government and software as a service, where we don't necessarily have to maintain those things anymore, where our operational duties become really more vendor management and understanding the application to help the business, but not taking care of that commodity stuff that we no longer need, like email, for example. Microsoft runs our email. Those type of applications we want to send out to the cloud. We no longer want to take care of those things. It's not in our best interest. We'll never have enough people to do those things. And so our approach has been really, get those things out from under us and have us do more oversight over those things. So back to seeding that fund. This year we found $52 million of one-time general fund revenues as a seed to the fund. Vermont was fortunate to exceed the forecasted revenues during the pandemic. Apparently a lot of people did a lot more shopping online than we expected. And they still bought their Amazon stuff from Amazon and did those types of things. So we had a much higher revenue. We had much more revenue than we had originally forecasted. So out of the $200 million that was excess, the governor decided to put $52 million to seed the fund to help the legislature understand what we would be doing with that money. We put the first 12 projects in line that we felt were of highest priority to the administration. We knew through that process that the legislature would have some ideas around what they may consider priority, and so the 12 projects we put forward ended up being expanded to 16 after the legislative process. We ended up with, I think, $66 million in funds between ARPA and general fund, and it was a good process. The one thing that I didn't get out of it, unfortunately, was a dedicated fund at this time. I believe that will happen in the second half of the biennium. So the way we asked for that fund was a special fund with a reoccurring revenue source. We identified a few different sources that would generate only about $10 million a year, but we felt like it was a good start to the fund. And we asked that the money be able to roll over from year to year, because as all of you probably know, these IT projects rarely happen in short time frames. A lot of these big systems take sometimes 2 or 3 years to implement. This was the list of the projects that the legislature decided to fund this year. 4 of these projects on this list reside on mainframes that are over 40 years old. And as you can see, there's money in there for cybersecurity and ERP upgrades on a ERP system that we haven't been able to keep updated and have had trouble funding. Online services for citizens, such as permit Act 250 applications and case management systems, and a Vermont business portal that is really going to look a lot like Maryland's one-stop portal. We're using, I believe, the same vendor that Maryland used. We did some demos and we really like the Maryland portal. So we're duplicating that effort. We were about $250,000 short. That's why the amount's so small. And so we put that into the modernization fund to make sure that we could finish out that project and offer those services to businesses and people doing business with the state of Vermont. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I mentioned, replacement of legacy systems has been something on the forefront for us, because they do pose serious cybersecurity risks, as well as stability risks to the people that they serve, whether it be a DMV IT system on a 40-year-old mainframe or an unemployment system that saw 80 times greater the number of applicants in the pandemic than it saw in any other year in modern time. And that sits on a 50-year-old mainframe with a programming language that's certainly older than I am. A Bright Future system that sends payments to childcare providers and helps track childcare providers around the state. Then Access Replacement is our integrated eligibility. When someone applies for a social service with human services, we want to be able to tell them what else they're eligible for across the state if they're having troubles and need assistance. So all of these systems sit on very, very old technology, and the way we went about this, it started with that application inventory of understanding what's out there, and then the security risk assessment security risk assessment that we did. And that brought a lot of light to what was out there that we didn't know, that I didn't know was out there. Yes?
John, sorry, I usually don't do this, but I was just thinking about that. How long did it take you guys to do your assessment? You're the broad landscape, so you can start to prioritize. What was the time frame for that?
Well, it was much easier probably for us because everyone worked for me, right?
Right.
So I did the IT application inventory. It probably took us 2 months because we had a number of other things going on, and I'm trying to bring my team along as we're building this agency. But it was one of the first things we did.
Right.
I want to know what's out there. When funds became available, we moved on to a risk assessment of our systems. But it was about 2 months having my people do it.
Okay, well, that's great. And so since all of our agencies don't report to, our do it might take us double that time, but we should be able to get it done in 4 to 5 months, I would think. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
Yeah, no problem. As far as the network assessments and the security assessments, security risk assessments on the applications, we outsource those things because we just don't have the in-house staff to be able to do those things. My approach was to have them outsourced, get us to a point where we could maintain them from that point going forward, right? So the security assessment of applications, as we bring a new application online, we would do a risk assessment. As we made changes to a system or the system got a year older, we would make risk assessment changes. But to begin with, in order to get that view of the enterprise and to make sure that we knew what was going on across the enterprise, I hired out for that. I had to, in order to make it timely. Next slide, please. Questions?
Thank you so much. That was incredibly, incredibly helpful. I just love hearing from other states. Staff, if you could stop the PowerPoint, I could get a better look at who all has questions. I really appreciate my other members of the committee for listening so closely. This is great stuff. Does anybody have a question for John? I could start with one. Let's see. So just for perspective, as we think about this consolidation, you shared with us a lot of the costs of like upgrading the legacy system. What's the operating budget from Vermont, and what's your operating budget? Like scale.
So the governor just approved a $7.2 billion budget. Each year my budget grows, as everything, right? But my budget grows for a different reason, because I'm trying to bring all IT costs into the agency. So we have a better view, and the legislature has a better view of what we're really spending on IT.
I was trying to figure that out too. We're figuring that out for the state of Maryland.
Right.
7.2 billion, and your percent of that is?
This coming year, we will spend about, it's about 150 million on IT. And that includes the project funds that you see there, the 66 million.
Okay. So that's okay. So do you divide that into operating and capital? Is that all operating?
That is, the 66 million is capital, right? Because that's not a reoccurring fund. Our agency budget sits at about $90 million on an average year, going up a little bit more every year because we find a little bit more IT out there, where we find a contract that's come up for renewal. We say, well, it's time to bring it into the agency of digital services so we can manage it. So every year it goes up a little bit. A lot of that is just billed back to the agency, but it gives us the ability to track what is IT.
Okay, and the 7.2 billion, I'm assuming that was a total budget. What's the operating budget for Vermont?
Oh, I don't know off the
Okay,
top.
we'll follow up offline. I was just
Okay,
trying to
thank
get us a ballpark.
Yeah.
Do other folks have questions?
Senator Hester, I can. Yeah.
Yes, Delegate, my co-chair, Delegate Pat Young.
Thank you, Senator and Mr. Quinn. I just wanted to follow up on, you had mentioned, I just want to make sure I was understanding that, are you all planning to outsource IT, or you've already done that? Because you had mentioned that you'll just never have enough people to manage the need. Is that a goal you're trying to reach, or you're already there?
No, we outsource that specific assessment.
Okay.
No, I am not trying to outsource IT for the state of Vermont. What I'm trying to do is build our capabilities in certain areas. So one of the things that we've done was move from this 1,400, different applications to think about specific platforms. Office 365 is a platform that we use, right? And so we've developed skill sets around maintaining that on the user side. Other platforms are Salesforce for our CRM space, all of our case management. When you think about government is case management overall. We have over 200 different ways of managing case management. So we focused on one platform, and that way we can build skill sets around Salesforce, and we can really focus in our resources to be able to, really get in depth and provide a center of excellence around that. We have, for endpoint protection, we use CrowdStrike to be able to help us, and Palo Alto to be able to help us. But in document management, it's OnBase. So we've picked certain things where if we have a new project coming up, or we have a new need, or a chance to modernize a legacy application, we want it to fit into one of these preferred platforms if possible. That's the way I think that we're going to win in Vermont. That's the way we're going to get ahead with the IT staff that we have. We have not received any new positions since creating the agency. What we did was we did an inventory of our people as well. And we looked across the enterprise and said, okay, here's where our skill sets are. Here's where we need our skill sets. Let's figure out how to transition over time to build in certain areas. So, while it's always easy, for me to go, it's not easy because my boss doesn't like to give out resources. But, while that's the easy approach, is to say I need more resources, I made a commitment that I wasn't going to do that. And I wasn't asking for resources. I needed a good handle on what we had across the enterprise, assess, evaluate, make strides where we can. And if it comes to that, then I'll ask. But so far, because of our approach and because of the centralization, I haven't had to ask for more resources.
Thanks for the clarification, because that sounds a lot more familiar with those conversations about platforming and, identifying where these needs can be monitored by somebody other than the legislature, by current organizations. They've been reaching out to us now, so I wanted to make sure that was where we were going. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Right. If I could just expand quickly, one of the other benefits of the central, what I found even once centralizing in the beginning, was I had agency IT personnel out there that reported to me, but maybe like this technology over there or like this one, and it provided the same functionality, right? So we couldn't continue to go down the road of 2 or 3 or 4 different platforms that did the same thing. We had to really narrow those down, but I had to bring the IT staff along at the same time and build that trust and really work on the agency specific staff to get them thinking about the long road. So it's definitely not an overnight shift. And when you're decentralized, getting agencies to fall under those same platforms is extremely difficult.
John, have you done an analysis of how much money you've saved by consolidating? Because it seems like you must have saved money. Yeah,
and actually that's one of the things that we report on to the legislature each year. And remember, Vermont's a small state with a small budget, but we capture things like opportunities in cost avoidance around our buying power. No longer, you know, where computers maybe cost us $1,200 before, because of our buying power, we're now spending $900 a computer. Those types of things, cutting back on the amount of contracts we had, using our preferred vendors that we've already, you know, chosen. And I think right now we're sitting at about $17 million in savings and avoidance. We don't recoup that. We let the agencies keep it. It's one of the things that makes it a little bit easier to get a true number. Is, you know, if the agency thinks you're going to pull that money out of their budget, give it to IT, then they don't want to actually acknowledge that it was a savings or an avoidance, at least here in Vermont.
17 million out over 2 years?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just had one last question. I'm going to do a quick scan to see if anybody else has any questions. But let's just see. Co-chair, you good? Good. Delegate Rosenberg? Can't see you. Okay. So while I'm waiting, my last question for you was, you know, early on we heard Secretary Leahy and Chip talk about the trouble with our procurement process. So they have to run through DGS, which adds, you know, and then BPW, which adds more and more and more time. It sounds like you have complete authority to do your own procurement, but you do have this kind of oversight committee. How exactly do those fit?
Well, not exactly. So
Okay.
there are multiple signers on contracts given, you know, a variety of different purchasing rules. Administration to the Attorney General's office, the agency head we have signed for who we're doing business with. So what we did was we created every Thursday for 1 or 2 hours, how many contracts they have to go through. That team is made up of someone from the Attorney General's office, from security, someone from our Chief Technical Officer's office, someone purchasing and procurement, as well as AOA and the agency asking for the IT. What that's done is it's really streamlined the amount of time it takes us to get through the procurement process.
So John is breaking up for me. Is it me or is it him?
I think it's him, Senator, because it's happening to me too.
Okay. John, we appear to have lost you. So we may have to move on. Are there any other questions for John?
We can email him after the fact too if any other members have questions.
Yeah, we're about halfway through our agenda and I really want to finish by 5. So Richard, if you don't mind, just please thank John. You know, his presentation was awesome. I feel like I learned so much. I definitely like to follow up with him afterwards. And if any members have additional questions, please send them to staff and we will follow up.
Am I back?
Oh, you're back.
Oh.
Did you hear all the nice things I said about you? Can you hear me now? You're not back, John.
No, it looks like I have.
I love it when we have internet connectivity.
Internet issues here on my end.
That's okay. We'll follow up with you offline, okay? My staff's going to email you.
He's gone again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's quite all right. We really appreciate it. Okay, so we are now switching gears again. Hold on. We've talked a lot about how our localities are at the forefront of some of these attacks. And so now we will hear from the municipal government perspective. And I would like to welcome Justin Fiore, the Manager of Government Relations for the Maryland Municipal League, Angelica Bailey, Director of Government Relations for the Maryland Municipal League, and Bill Garrett, the Director of Information Services for the City of Salisbury. We really appreciate hearing from you guys about what is going on at the local level. Are we going in that order, Justin? If so, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Justin Fiore here with the Maryland Municipal League. Thank you both to chairs Hester and Young, as well as the rest of the committee for inviting us today, and staff for setting everything up. Angelica will not be presenting, but I believe she's here or around, so she can help with follow-up questions. We also appreciate the flexibility to invite one of our local experts to explain their needs, as well as answer any technical questions, because that's not exactly my background. Speaking broadly and on behalf of the 157 municipalities, I think my initial comments are best focused on relating the challenge of size, staffing, information types, and risk. On the small end, one of our towns has 13 residents, and that's just one of 5 municipalities with a population below 100. There are 20 municipalities with fewer than 300 residents. Excluding Baltimore City, which has its own unique status, our 3 largest municipalities are between 67,000 and 74,000 strong, which is larger than several counties. I share this with you because there's a reasonable correlation between their size and then their staffing, their services offered, the information that's collected, and the risk associated with those bits of information. Our involvement in these discussions has generally been centered around understanding that risk, the difference across our membership, and then help identifying appropriate measures. In my time with the MML, the message has been clear, and that's that we need support from our state partners and our federal partners. In general, municipal governments, both large and small, lack the in-house cybersecurity expertise. Many municipalities do not even have dedicated IT staff. Some are without a website. Municipal governments need access to experts, both in terms of administration and just implementing some security standards. I'll add that the problem is generally well defined at the local level. So assessments aren't as needed as just resources. It was very encouraging to hear some of the comments earlier about what might be available for free. And as kind of MML's role in this, one thing we can do is push that information to our members via email, via conferences. So I may have identified a future speaker at a fall conference here today, and that's really exciting when we can do that for our members. I'd also like to save some time now to let you hear from Bill Garrett, the Director of Information Services from the City of Salisbury, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the invite to come out and speak with you all this afternoon. Justin was right. When it comes to municipalities, we're kind of right in the middle of the numbers he gave between the smallest and the largest. Depending on the final census numbers, we're expecting to be somewhere in the high 40s to low 50s as far as citizens go. But he's exactly right. For us, the assessments and the needs analysis aren't really the critical thing that they are for the larger organizations. For us, it's more about funding and resources. So I'm going to kind of tackle the 4 questions that we're given from the perspective of here in the city of Salisbury. So it's only been in the last 7 or so years that our tech presence has really taken off. We elected Mayor Day out here about 8 years ago, and he's really embraced technology. He sees the benefit and the power that it provides to the municipality, both to the departments as well as the citizens. Just before I took over the IT department here, I was with Wicomico County. We oversaw the city's IT department. At the time, that split just about a decade ago when I came over and took the directorship. At that time, I kind of walked into what I consider the golden unicorn situation. It's that perfect scenario where there was nothing. As a tech guy, I got to literally build the infrastructure here from the ground up. In doing so, I was able to design the network and the security infrastructure the way it needed to be. Design it with the best practices and the and best policies in place to make sure that we had everything we needed to be successful. all the tech services and procurement power were consolidated into my department. We are kind of oversee everything for all the other departments. Each department maintains their own individual budget, but we have the spending power for those budgets. We recommend how much is funded for each department annually to handle all of the technology needs for those departments. We oversee the project. We kind of act as a project manager, liaison, all that stuff. So one of the big things we've also been doing is pushing to consolidate all of the siloed data sets and applications into as much of a unified platform with our ERP as we can. Here in Salisbury, when it comes to the cybersecurity preparedness and governance, it really is that we need the support of the administration. Without that, we wouldn't be able to get much of anything done. It is paramount here. Next question was about the cybersecurity needs on a local level. We differ a bit from the larger organizations just due to scale. Our primary focus here is on training of personnel. It's on management of our log aggregation software so we can ensure best practices and standards are being adhered to. There's been a rise lately on the attacks on SCADA and industrial systems. We have several water plants in town and in the city. We've got a wastewater plant. We need to, since the attacks, there's an attack in Oldsmar, Florida in February where they could have, the attacker got in and was able to kind of circumvent security and was able to, I guess, disrupt the flow of the water plant there. Things like the Colonial Pipeline attack back in April. There are simple best practices that could be implemented, air gapping the networks, air gapping the systems, managing user accounts, disabling vendor accounts when not in use, password management, just basic things that could have been easily used to stop those kinds of attacks. Having staff be able to focus on those practices and giving the authority by the administration to implement these across the organization is critical. So that's what we've been focusing on here in the last year or so, is really kind of doubling down on the administrative security needs of our industrial systems. The innovative or technical approach exists to migrate risk and strengthen data management. Last year, we restructured my department to allow my assistant director to focus more on the security and compliance. In my experience, it's again throwing good money after bad. You can throw as much money as you want, but without the staff to view the logs, to parse the data, all that is useless. Somebody needs to be able to react to the alerts, to be able to let somebody know if there is a problem. Other methods we're taking are designing our infrastructure, kind of moving forward to try to mitigate any threat actors. We're doing things like next-gen firewalls with IDPS and intrusion detection and prevention. Antivirus software that we have across our organization that has built-in crypto detection. So if it detects, things like files being encrypted, it'll immediately lock down the workstation of the server to try to prevent that from spreading. However, the utmost importance is training. The weakest link in the chain is always the staff across the city. Phishing or spear phishing is the #1 cause for network infiltration. So somebody clicking a bad link or installing a piece of software or plugging their username and password into a piece of software that spoofs another website. It's very, very common. So we are providing biannual or twice annual training for our staff using a security partner called KnowBe4. They provide phishing campaigns, and we use that to kind of fine-tune training for our staff depending on who has weaknesses in what areas. Again, we only have 400 employees across the entire city, so it's not that huge of a deal as some of the larger organizations. One of the other things we had to do we've noticed, we've been doing this for about 4 years now with the actual training. Noticed that people were getting lackadaisical with it. People would actually joke and laugh about failing the exams and the tests, and they wouldn't take it seriously. So I went to the mayor's office and we kind of revisited our internal computer internet use policy and put some teeth in there. So we were able to hold staff accountable for what they do. Moving forward, there are real world repercussions for any kind of I guess just not taking it seriously and not learning from your mistakes. The training's there to try to keep us safe. That leads into the cost of cybersecurity. So regardless of the type of attack, no matter what it is, you're going to have a loss of productivity, loss of confidence from the stakeholders. In our case, it'll be our citizens, and there's going to be time spent recovering from the attack. IBM did a study recently and determined the average cost of a data breach in the United States in 2020 was $3.86 million, the average per attack. So it's much easier to fund the needed departmental personnel and hardware and software than it is to clean up the PR nightmare and technological mess that comes with recovering after an attack. So again, for the municipalities here, for a city our size, the number one thing is staffing and resources to be able to do what we need to do to help staff and do our jobs.
Great, thanks, Bill. And I just looked at my agenda, and I'm sorry, Justin, if you had mentioned, is Angelica Bailey going to be speaking?
She was looking to tune in, but I think she's just going to be available for questions or follow-up. Still relatively new to the organization, but leading our advocacy efforts, so I think she's standing by for this one.
No worries. Don't want to throw her right on the hot coals. Any questions for the panel? I see Senator Lee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Bill Garrett, thank you for that excellent presentation. I know years ago there was a ransomware attack on the, I think it was the Salisbury Police Department.
3 years ago.
Yeah, what was the cost of that? Did they ever recover all their data back? And what sort of steps were taken, best practices to kind of to help prevent that? I guess that includes probably hygiene too as well. And are you working to protect your other infrastructure and other agencies? Because I know the localities have been particularly targeted. And have you been also coordinating with the state too? And thank you for again for that presentation.
Yes, yeah, we were lucky in that we were compromised, but no data was exfiltrated. We didn't lose any data. We had best practices in place to mitigate the attack in its entirety. As soon as our alert went off that there was unauthorized or unexpected activity on one of the servers, we immediately were able to get in and shut that machine down, which halted the spread of any attack. We had best practices in place, essentially backups, offsite backups that were not compromised. So we were able to recover that. We had everything back up within a day or so. The total cost for that was, I forget that it was 3 years ago. I'm not sure the exact amount, but it wasn't anything significant because it was just the labor hours to kind of go in and recover the data and get it back up and running. It was more of a hassle for the police department because they had to operate kind of pen and paper, go back old school. So they did that, and we got everything back. We worked with the FBI with that, and at that point we were made aware of some of the efforts that the federal government was making with the, as they talked about earlier, with the cybersecurity assistance programs that they have. So we have had some analysis done on different. We had them run scans at one point shortly thereafter to look for any kind of openings on the city side. Our city and our police department are two completely separate infrastructures. So we had them run that to kind of check on that. Everything checked out well. We did make some changes to the police department's the kind of behind the scenes database, if you want to call that. I don't want to get too nerdy here on it, but the Active Directory background, where we kind of changed up the way accounts were able to access things. We implemented some additional elevated credential systems just to kind of try to mitigate any future threat. the attack came by way of a compromised vendor. So when we found that out, we found out that they had also had other vendors, or that same vendor with other customers in the area had similar issues within the past year or two, other small municipalities. So it looks like somebody had I guess gotten a list of username and password information for their customer base. So it wasn't anything that we were able to kind of mitigate on our side, because it was a compromised vendor account, short of being able to determine that ahead of time. And lockdown, one of the things we are doing now is locking down vendor accounts when they're not in use. They have to call us and tell us that they want to activate it. So it's an additional layer of security that we've implemented since then.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Garrett. It sounds like you took steps, and there hasn't been anything since that time. So it sounds like and fortunately you didn't lose a lot of data, and
Right.
so you didn't have to pay the ransom, right?
No.
That's good, because I think sometimes they do.
Mhm.
But I was wondering if you do also information sharing with other entities, similar like yourself, as a way to proactively prevent it, because you would be warned of one vendor not being as secure as it should be, as what the federal government's doing right now. I understand they're doing information sharing. Are you doing that in the localities too?
Some of us are. We're kind of a ragtag band of outlaws here on the Eastern Shore. So yeah, there are a few of us that we have an email list going, and we kind of send things back and forth. The state has actually been sending out within recent months the alerts and the different coded messages, and those are wonderful. Those are really, really wonderful. Those have gotten us talking a lot down here. Myself and some of my local colleagues do kind of correspond. The data sharing, though, we tend to do more on the law enforcement side, kind of dealing with the Maryland State Police, the County Sheriff's Office, our city police department, and then other local jurisdictions, just sharing that kind of information. But when it comes to technology stuff, we're really the only municipality in the area that has a large enough IT department to, our staff, we're 10 people strong down here. So yeah, we're the only ones in the area that really have an IT department, other than the counties. And I worked for about 10 years with Wacomico County prior to coming here, so we've got a pretty strong relationship with them and some of the other counties, just due to the time spent down here.
Sounds like you're ahead of the curve. Thank you for all your work and for preventing cyber attacks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Mr. Garrett, you spurred a question for me, and you had mentioned you're a 10-person shop, so you're the largest over on that side, correct?
As far as I know, yes. As far as cities, yes. I think there are some counties that may have larger departments, yeah.
But in terms, and obviously your relationship with the police department, I mean, they receive funding from you, but they're not, they don't run under your direction. They don't have an IT department?
No, we do study for the entire, we have a full-time dedicated technologist that we have out there on site. We've got our systems administrator and network administrator deal with all their systems. We run lead on all their projects. They're essentially treated as another department of the city when it comes to technology needs.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm trying to bridge the gap between, I know from the other speakers as well, transparency and communication is key when one, just trying to implement these programs, and two, when it sounds like from what you just experienced, and when an event happens that needs to be addressed. So just was curious between the relationship between the executive's office and other departments related to their IT security, and then their communication and organization once they're addressing an event if it happens. But I appreciate the background. That was good. I believe Senator Hester, my co-chair, has a question.
Thank you very much. Bill, I would say that you're 10 people super strong down there. You're doing so much.
Thank you.
My question is if you could just be a little bit more specific about the type of support you're currently getting from the state. And then, like in an ideal world, what type of support, would you ideally like to have? I heard a lot about resources, but just if you could be specific on what you're currently getting and what you'd really like to get, that would help us move forward, I think.
Yeah, what we're currently getting, the only thing we're really using to any extent is the I think weekly or I guess they're weekly or several times a week, the email blasts with the threats, the different information that the known malicious domains, things of that nature. That email blast has been wonderful. When it comes to state resources, that is really the only thing that we're taking advantage of. I think a lot of it is simply due to lack of knowing what's available or knowing what's out there. I periodically go in and check the state, that the House bills and the things that are going forward. But existing resources, existing things, we're not here in the smaller municipalities. We're not really aware a lot of times of what's being made available to us. So sometimes we'll hear about something in passing from a colleague at a different either at the county level or a different municipality, but yeah, that's pretty much it as far as needs that we would have. I think just more readily available information as to what is available might be nice. I mean, maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, but yeah, that's Justin.
Yeah, and it's a great question, Senator. I think part of what I'm about to bring up now was mentioned in the work group during session. But when I was reaching out to some of our other security folks, IT folks, they mentioned leveraging the cloud specifically in terms of being able to have a platform in which to work on, share on, especially as we do more remote work. One, the cloud space has a cost associated with it. Two, also securing that. And I was made aware that the federal government's doing a really good job of this right now, where a department or one agency might have the platform itself, and then they're in charge of kind of securing it, making sure that the other people who are accessing it are more as a tenant and can't compromise the system through their procedures. And so I think that was just one more example of the kind of things specifically small municipalities would really benefit from, especially those that don't have IT staff in-house.
That's a great perspective. Thank you so much, Justin.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions that folks have for either Bill or Justin? Well, I'm not seeing any, so we might move on, but thank you so much for providing this, this really on the ground look. We really appreciate it. And I know that, as the Maryland Cybersecurity Council proceeds with its research, we'll definitely be in close touch so that over the summer, we continue to gather more information. So thank you both so very, very much.
Excellent. Thank you for all your great work.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to move on now to get the perspective of from the education sphere. And we've got two different entities. I'm very pleased that we have the Maryland State Department of Education, Dale Cornelius, the Chief Information Officer for MSDE, and Maureen Donahue, the Data Governance and Privacy Specialist. Thank you both for joining us. We also have from Baltimore County Public School System, Jim Corns, the Executive Director of the IT Department. And I don't know, would you guys want to go? Is it two separate presentations or are you guys kind of like a panel? Nobody, two separate panels. Okay, thank you, Jim. Okay, so then let's have MSDE go first, and Jim, we'll tee you up next. Welcome, Maureen and Jim. Over to you.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is Dale. Can you hear me? All right. I just need another confirmation that you can hear me because I actually couldn't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Excellent.
We got you, Dan.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. All right, so thank you everybody for inviting us to this meeting. My name is Dale Cornelius and I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Maryland State Department of Ed. And with me today is Maureen Donahoe, and she is our brand new data privacy and security specialist. And I just want to give a shout out to Maureen because she just walked into her job, and our information systems security officer is actually out on vacation. So she's here to answer any questions, but she is brand new. So let's keep that in mind.
Thank you very much.
All right. So we were asked to think about a few different questions related to cybersecurity, and I wanted to start off with this one because it is more global. The question has to do with what is the cybersecurity preparedness and governance in Maryland from an MSDE perspective. And we do have a governance perspective that is rooted in the state security manual. We've talked about a little bit in our mentioning of the NIST framework, which is what the Maryland State Security Manual is based on. So the Office of Legislative Audits performs information security audits on MSDE as well as local school systems. Those audits are against conformance or compliance with the state security manual. So that is our framework. That's what we use. And as you know, we are an enterprise agency, which means a significant portion of our security framework is provided by DoIT. We collaborate with local CIOs. We meet monthly to discuss hot topics, and oftentimes that involves security. Slide, please. Second question we were asked to talk about is the role of MSDE in the event of a cyber attack on a school system. So when a school system is attacked and the FBI comes in, it does become a crime scene, and MSDE is not involved. The state CISO, Chip Stewart, is involved, and he works with the local IT department and their security operations center. MSDE is not involved in the resolution of the compromise, but I am in communication with the CIO, and of course we take measures to protect our own environment, so such as blocking email or disabling external access to any internal systems at MSDE that local school systems have access to. So the next thing we're asked to talk about are innovative or technical approaches to mitigate risk and strengthen data management, and there are a lot of them. The state security manual has a lot of information in there and a lot of regulations, rules, best practices, I should say. And when I came into this job 2 years ago, I thought that was somewhat aspirational, but we've made a lot of progress. So it's just a matter of time until, you know, everybody is in full compliance. But some of the high-level items that we've been focused on is protecting data at rest and in transit, updating annually disaster recovery plans, assessing and managing compliance with the state security manual overall is an ongoing task, and ensuring system security plans for systems exist and are accurate. Those are just 4 examples. There's a pretty extensive list in the manual. The manual breaks down what the agency's responsibilities are. So in addition to some of these approaches to mitigate risk, we also collaborate with the local school districts, and we provide guidance for processing FERPA data, so personally identifiable information, student information. We provide guidance and procedures on vetting internet sites, educational technology applications. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done in this area, especially with the pandemic and the remote learning and the increase in the usage of online learning applications. But then we also work with them to develop and update professional development on data governance policies and procedures. So in terms of improving cybersecurity, testing cybersecurity, and modernizing the IT systems used by MSDE, MSDE works with DoIT, basically move towards full compliance with the state security manual. So that's a lot of work, and it's a slow-moving process in some ways and faster in other ways. We've completed a number of IT modernization projects over the last couple of years, and all of them are centered around better protecting the sensitive information at MSDE. That's my presentation, and if you have more questions, we'll take them now, or you can feel free to contact us.
Great. So I don't want to get too into the weeds because I know you were, mentioning about when, in the event of a cyber attack, something happens. I was just, other than the BCPS cyber attack that happened recently, has there been another one in Maryland? There was one on the city, or was that just on city government?
I believe the city government occurred a few years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't so it wasn't the school system. How have you all reacted? And I know it was on paper, you mentioned how you would react, but how have you all engaged with school systems that have been the subject of a cyber attack in recent years?
I mean, have we engaged with Baltimore City or Baltimore County?
A school system that has suffered a cyber attack, and I'm only putting it out there because if it was just Baltimore County, it was just Baltimore County. I'm just leaving it open so that you can express to us how you interacted with that school system, which you mentioned it's limited. I'm just asking for how you've interacted with a school system that has been the subject of a cyber attack.
Well, initially it was by phone, and then it was by email. So, the CIO at Baltimore County, who's on this call, Jim Corns, and I talked about the incident and took action. There's a technology leadership forum in Maryland of all the local school system CIOs, and we meet on a monthly basis. So the word spreads pretty quickly when something happens. So we handle a lot of communications through that forum.
Gotcha. And then, as you mentioned, after the handoff, because once it becomes a FBI investigation, you guys are hands off. What's the communication like with the school system after that? Is it just monthly or weekly, or just an update, or is there no real protocol associated with following back up? It's just we expect some sort of information associated with this internally as MSD.
Well, so the initial communication is usually going to be daily, and then weekly, and then monthly. It gets less and less over time. There is a provision in the state security manual to develop a incident response plan. And this is something we've been looking at the state level with the CIOs. So what is the incident response plan? There currently is an incident response plan at the district level, and that usually involves working with their security operations center. And of course, when the FBI is brought in, the CISO gets involved. So there is but the question then becomes, what should MSDE's role be in an incident response plan, right? And how can that be more formalized? So we've been talking about that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's, you don't want to get involved or muck up a situation that doesn't have necessarily pertain to you. Is there an expectation, or should there be, from, I guess, legislators or elected leaders to, I guess, have a after action report coming from you all as well as the school system, or is that, am I thinking out too much outside of your purview after an incident, that is?
Well, I just, I know from my own experience, the resolution of a compromise report is usually put out by the Security Operations Center working with the agency. So, MSDE, it would be nice to be privy to that report, of course, and then, share best practices. And we've done things like that before. But, whether or not we have access to that information it remains to be seen, because we haven't formalized the plan yet.
Sure. And you don't want to be redundant. I completely understand that. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a ton of questions, which I'm not going to ask you guys today because we're running up against the top of our time cutoff. But I wanted to thank you for being with us. And if any of our committee members have additional questions for MSDE on this topic, once again, if you could funnel those through staff, and we'll follow up and get you the answers to those questions, that would be great. I did want to point out that the state audits of the local school, the local school systems happen every 4 years. And this year we had 4 school systems with repeat cybersecurity findings, which means that they hadn't corrected things that they needed to correct 4 years ago. So it'll be really interesting to follow up with you to see what action you have taken with those 4 school systems. So with that, let's turn over to Mr. Jim Corns. Thank you so much for being here. And I wanted just to, as I introduce you, to say that we're not trying to put you on the hot seat at all. You are the victim in this situation, and we are short on time. So, I think, what we really want to get out of it, I mean, obviously say what you're prepared to say, but I'm really looking for like the top 3 things that we at the state can do to help the public school system at the local level. What can we learn from your experience? And once again, we're short on time, so brevity is appreciated.
Great at that, Senator Freihester, and thank you for allowing me to speak. And Delegate Young, thank you for this opportunity. Just as a very quick bird walk, this is my 27th year in Maryland public school systems. I've actually worked in Kent County, St. Mary's County, and Washington County as the CIO in all 4 of the districts I've been in. And so what I would start off by simply saying is that the needs of the 24 LEAs are widely divergent based on their size. Just to bring a scope, spent 16 years in Kent County. I actually have more IT professionals than they have school teachers. So there is a scale of means that comes in with the size of each district. It would really be beneficial. The first thing I will say from an offering from the state that was immediately available to us, and I could not have gotten through this system rebuild, was we received right after the attack, I personally received a direct communication from Chip Stewart in his office, and Chip and I spoke about 3 times a day for the first 2 months. And unfortunately, having the dubious distinction of being the largest ransomware attack in the state of Maryland up to this point is not one that I would like to walk around with, but it's the reason that we're here today, or the reason I'm here to speak to you today. And so what I would say is from a learning standpoint and a growth standpoint, the interactions we've had with both Chip's office and the MCAC organization that I heard the gentleman from Salisbury referring to as putting out the information. They've really been ramping up their ability to receive information from us. Like we've been sending over phishing attack information so that they can add it to their database to put out into their blasts. The pieces that really benefited us moving out of this were the ability to get MEMA involved during our restoration and rebuild. Getting the guidance from Chip and his office to be able to talk about making that next right step. When you experience the scale of ransomware that we did, it quickly becomes a difficult process to look around and say, what's the first thing to get done? And having a sounding board to speak to those next right steps was wildly beneficial. And then as Dale from Mr. Cornelius has spoke to, just being able to have that conversation from all 24 of the CIOs within the state to be able to share best practices and stories. Unfortunately, I have become a cautionary tale to our other CIOs, but I also believe that if I have to find a silver lining in everything, it is one that there's been a raised awareness in all the 23 other school systems as to the importance of cybersecurity. I would have told you on November 22nd that I thought we had a pretty good security posture. And then on November 25th, I would tell you that I don't have the confidence in that same security posture. I will steal a slogan, and though I know this is a bipartisan committee, I'll borrow from President Biden that we have built back better in Baltimore County so that our posture now is a much more secure one. And we have a confidence level that the type of attack that we were victim of will not happen again. But unfortunately, the bad actor has to be lucky one time, and I have to be accurate 100%. And so the continued conversations that we've been having with the coordination efforts from the state CISO have been invaluable, and they continue to this day. So in a very brief statement, that's exactly what the biggest benefit we've had is the ability to tap into the knowledge and the resource base that has been provided from the state of Maryland.
Thank you very much, Jim. And so just quickly, if there were 2 or 3 things that the state could do to prevent an attack, what would those be?
And so, Senator Hester, I would say that they've been listed already. It's end user awareness, multi-factor authentication, segregation of your network. Those are the 3 big technical things that we really would benefit from across the board. In our instance, we no longer support a local Active Directory. We now use Microsoft's Azure Active Directory, which is a much less integrated system that provides us some level of security that is above and beyond a normal Active Directory stance. We have a very robust endpoint protection with a 24/7 SOC that's attached to it. So moving the state of Maryland to a 24/7 SOC posture would be a really great step forward. The answer is that with every different kind of attack that might come, there is probably an attack vector that matches that. And so we have been working diligently to reinvest in best practices to make sure that we've got the most comprehensive processes in place that would allow for a general support of, we're playing defense against known and unknown. And so trying to find that middle ground between, an overcorrection where end users can no longer do anything. And as Mr. Stewart spoke to, that shadow IT. So the error that I can create is I can turn the screws down so tight on my end user that they can find no other way to do their job than to go around my processes. Right. And that develops shadow IT. So how do you strike the balance between super secure while still easy to use? And we've been making really great strides with our just awareness from our end users, our teachers, and just as a size comparability, I have 150,000 end users that range in age from 4 to greater than 50, and so that's a wide berth to speak to from an end user standpoint. But we've been working very diligently to make sure that we have all of the security in place that can be supported by that group of end users without creating a need for them to go around our processes.
Senator
Thank
Hester.
you very much. That's all for me. Mr. Chairman?
Yep. So thanks for the information, Mr. Corns. And I know we were on a time crunch, so I'll try and be brief here. When I was in the infantry, we had a saying that we were always training for the war we just fought. So there's no way that you can create a completely secure system. And I acknowledge and also appreciate the steps you guys are taking since the last cyber attack. Forgive me, those 3 things you mentioned: user knowledge,
multi-factor authentication,
and segregating your system.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. And obviously that would help prevent and wouldn't make anything perfect. And I don't think anybody expects perfection. How many have you implemented all 3 of those things? If not, how long is it going to take to implement those 3 things in BCPS's system?
So the first one is kind of always an ongoing process. Yep. Right. Multi-factor authentication will be for the beginning of school year for all administrators, or all adults, because our adults have a different posture than our students. But we've already implemented multi-factor authentication for password resets and things of that nature. So it is a process that we're working through our stakeholders, as in TABCO, which is our teachers association and things. Everyone has an awareness and an understanding that it needs to happen. So by the beginning of the school year, we're going to have MFA turned on, multi-factor authentication, abbreviated MFA, turned on for every adult, all 22,000 employees. And network segregation, was easier to occur because our system was put in a position where we had to build a new one.
Gotcha.
From an infrastructure standpoint.
And the new build is going to, your segregation is built into the plan.
Yes, sir.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So once again, same process applies. If anybody else has questions, additional questions for Mr. Jim Corns, please circulate those to staff and we'll consolidate and circulate the answers. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the hard work that you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. So moving on to our last panel, I think it's really important that we not only hear from state government and local government, but also the private sector and an advocacy group. I'm thrilled to be joined here by Brian Dykstra, the CEO of Atlanta Data Forensics, and Forrest Senti from the National Cybersecurity Center to offer their perspective. I think, what was I say? We'll start off with Mr. Brian Dykstra, and you've been with us before. I remember last year you scared me so much that I almost didn't invite you back. But if you can tell us from the private sector what the public sector should be considering right now based on what you've heard. And I know you've been listening to us since 2 o'clock, so I want to applaud you from staying with us. And once again, I'm not sure we're gonna have a ton of time for questions, but certainly.
I put together just a couple slides.
Yeah, let's go through
somebody
those.
have those. Yeah, and you can skip the first slide. Of course, it's just me. Yeah,
really
so
thank you for coming back.
There you go. So Atlantic Data Forensics, what they call a digital forensics and incident response provider, DFIR. We're headquartered in Elk Ridge. We have offices around the U.S. We handled 144 cybersecurity incidents in 2020, all the way from real SMBs, and I'm talking like 5-person doctors' offices, accounting offices, things like that, up to some full, Fortune 50 multinationals. So all over the board. We're going to do maybe double that this year. We took in 5 new incidents so far this week. So it's not fun out there right now. It's primarily ransomware, what they call business email compromise, or BEC. There's so much of it, they've created an acronym for it now, which is usually followed by ACH fraud. That definitely affects small and mid-sized businesses. And then nation state threat actors hitting the bigger companies. We've responded to all your standard ransomware groups, DarkSide, Rogue, Conti, Claw, Evil. You pick one, we've dealt with them. And we negotiate and pay off ransoms for about 25% of our clients right now, because they're left with no other alternative. You want to go on to that next slide? Like I said, it is real bad out there right now, because ransomware doesn't really care what your business is, or what you're doing, or what type of data you have. They're not really interested in that. They're interested in the fact that you have a bank account, or you have an insurance provider that'll bankroll a payment to them, and things like that. The small companies, they don't have the expertise, the people, the budgets, things like this to really protect themselves fully, or they don't believe they do. So maybe they do have the budget, they just don't have the expertise to implement it, things like that. In large companies, or like the school system mentioned earlier, you have tech debt. You have legacy going back, years, decades, things like this that doesn't get updated, doesn't get taken offline. Same thing. You got lack of expertise, lack of personnel, and in large companies, you also have an executive management problem. There's still a lot of C-level folks out there who think it's going to happen to somebody else, not me. Everything we have here is backed up and encrypted, and whatever other lie they tell themselves to enable them to sleep at night about is what goes on, and then those companies get hit, and those are multi-billion-dollar organizations. So the size or scale of your operation, as we've seen in some of the highly publicized ransomware attacks recently, just doesn't matter. And then most of these attacks you hear about in the media, they're easily preventable. This is not unstoppable hackers or folks in black hoodies or anything like this. They don't involve sophisticated tools, and they're really largely taking advantage of really poor IT management practices, just not doing the very most basic things that you would expect people to do to take care of their IT infrastructure. And That's just the truth of it. I mean, we see now I've been doing this since the late 90s, strangely enough. And I see exactly the same things get people in trouble back, from the early 2000s is get people in trouble now. It doesn't change. In some cases, they're using the same system that they were using in the 90s. So, that explains that easily. Next slide, please. And then the larger problems that are out there in the private sector, there isn't any really easy answer to dealing with these ransomware threat actors because they operate very much like organized crime. They're operating globally. And so there's, jurisdictional problems getting to them. Some of them are protected by the various countries that they operate out of. Things like this. And there's just lots of places on the internet for them to operate. So you take one down, it's whack-a-mole, and another one pops right back up with the, slightly different name and the same tool set. Trying to legislate against it. There's currently a bill going through the U.S. Senate as 808 Cybersecurity Disclosure Act. They're trying to create a 24-hour, notice reporting act requirement to the government, and if you don't make it in time, we start penalizing you on a daily basis for this. So while a company is supposed to be trying to get their systems back online and deal with things like this, you have the government re-penalizing them for what essentially is a data collection effort on their part. Doesn't help them, doesn't catch the hacker, doesn't really do anything. Just bureaucracy over the top of something. And then state, local, federal law enforcement agencies, they just don't have the ability to investigate all of this. They can't. They can't even get near all the reported incidents that are coming in. I saw during some numbers from the FBI recently for the IC3, say the Internet Crime Center up in Pittsburgh, say they're taking in 4,000 new reports a day or something like this. They can investigate less than 1% of that. So it's a really tough problem. And then you combine that with insurance carriers right now are reevaluating whether they even want to be in that business. There's a lot of discussion again, amongst the large insurance carriers about, do we want to give out new policies if we just know we're going to keep paying off on this ransomware? This is, we're not exactly building up a large backlog of these here. And prices that I've seen, from clients in the last year have gone up 3 and 4 times over what they were the year before. So it's going to get to a point where only the largest companies could, afford this anyway, if it keeps going like it is. And that is absolutely all the good news I have to deliver to you.
That was horrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's why I don't get invited to a lot of parties. It just.
Oh man, I feel worse than I felt last year. Can you, if there were 3 things you would suggest that the state do based on what you've heard today, what would they be?
The state to help private industry, or the state to help the state? Because the state needs help.
The state to help the state first. We got to do that first. What should the state do?
I agree with what Dewitt was saying about, and obviously I supported your bill previously about bringing everything under one level of control. Because if you've got 53, I believe it was at some point, different agencies all running their own budgets and their own structures and things like that, that's chaos. No company, no well-run organization runs like that. I can't even imagine trying to manage something like that with all that. I bet you'd save $500 million a year, first year for the state, just by organizing your purchasing that way. But I could be wrong. Government contracting being what it is, who knows? So that's a big thing. And I think I heard earlier, this idea of, you got to have this special leveling of too secure versus, not secure enough. No, you don't. No, there's just things that we need to do nowadays to be safe and still operate in a networked environment that you just simply can't make exceptions for. If you are not doing 2-factor authentication every time you VPN, every time you check your email, every time you log into your computer, every time a sysadmin logs into a server, then you're just waiting around for the hackers to get to you. That's going to happen. And then the third thing is really, and this seems like this shouldn't even be a problem, but in a big organization like the state, you don't really know what all your assets are. You don't know where all your computers are. You don't know how many are out there, things like that. And that's just the nature of organizations. The cloud's only made it worse, right? So there's lots and lots and lots of assets out there that nobody's really got under management. And the hackers will definitely find those, make use of those, and you know, we'll have bad days, which does put my kids through college. So, you know, it's not the worst thing ever.
Thank you very much, Brian. Mr. Chair, do you have any questions?
I'm good. Sorry, I was looking at a note I written.
That's okay. I think it's the end of a long day. I mean, you're definitely an expert in this area. I just want to thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Probably would like to have an offline conversation, but we'll save it for another day. And thank you so much.
Always available. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, last but certainly not least is Forrest Senti. Hold on one second. Forrest, we're just really glad that you hung in here with us for the day. Once again, you're with the National Cybersecurity Center, and you and I have had the pleasure of talking about the resources available for state leaders, and we're getting ready to roll that out in Maryland. So if you could quickly describe to us what you're going to do, and maybe we can also have a separate introduction, where we've got more legislators on the phone, but in the last 10 minutes, we'd really like to hear your words of wisdom.
Sure, happy to. And it's been amazing to learn more about what the state of Maryland is doing these days. So it's been educational for me, because between hearing about Secretary Leahy and Chip Stewart's work more in depth, it's been pretty incredible. So you guys should all be proud of all the things you're doing. So again, thank you, Senator Hester and Delegate Young, for having me and the rest of the committee. It's not a subcommittee. Very grateful to be here. My name is Forrest Senti, just like Senator Hester said. I'm the Vice President of Programs and Operations here at the National Cybersecurity Center. And I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of what we're doing here with cybersecurity for state leaders. You can go to the next slide. So for a little bit of quick background about us, we are a Colorado-based nonprofit. We're all about raising cybersecurity awareness and innovation. We were established back in 2016, and a lot of our programs cover things from election security. We have a huge focus on workforce development, where we work with over 1,000 different students across the Southwest, and it's growing. We're the home of the first ever Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We were designated at the White House to hold that, and that's been an awesome experience. We became operational earlier this year. And then our newest program is really focused on this idea of working around what is security in a smart city. So that's been, a lot of our efforts are in that area. Next slide, please. To get to the point of why we're here today. So last year, one of the big things between all of us staying at home and COVID and getting to work remotely and having to work with all of our peers to make sure that we were all safe and secure at home, is we got a chance to work with a lot of rural people over last year, especially when it comes to things like infrastructure and understanding their needs in IT. And one of the big things that came up through those conversations was understanding the normalization and prioritization of cybersecurity in those communities and how we can start to talk about it broadly. And one of the big things that came out of that is that the people that are often responsible for either setting policy or funding decisions, or some of these things that end up setting mandates down to the city and county level, are people like yourself, legislators. And as part of that, we realized that one of the big things is that cybersecurity as a core policy issue is quickly becoming something that's kind of underlying the effectiveness and efficiency of how we can actually secure our state enterprises. So beyond that, we basically developed this idea, okay, how do we create an elevated level of cybersecurity awareness across all of the US between legislators, staff, and even state elected officials at the state level. So we basically came up with this training that we're going to talk about today. And then really the big goal of it is all about adding an additional layer of security for yourself as an individual so you can be a part of that greater system. It's all about adopting best practices and making sure the states can create these relationships within their communities that they may or may not already have to kind of drive those to bigger outcomes. Next slide, please. So to talk more about the training itself, the biggest thing is it's separated into three pieces. The very beginning of it that we start off with is really understanding what is the ecosystem of cybersecurity. Oftentimes, every single state is different, and all of these different state systems all engage in a different way. Like I just heard a little bit ago that the state at one point had 53 different systems, and you wanted to bring it under one system, right? There are several states across the United States that are having the exact same issues that Maryland is having, when it comes to centralization of IT or investment of IT. And driving that greater awareness of those issues is a huge problem in making sure that we all can kind of be committed to the idea of what is the best practice and how can we drive that home. So a lot of the things we talk about are understanding, what did the information sharing community do during 9/11? How did they actually share those best practices to make sure that we could get the communication grid online? So our CEO talks about that. We have people talking about ransomware attacks, specifically here in the state of Colorado. What happened? How did investment in IT at the state level lead to a better outcome when that attack actually happened? Or even just understanding, what is a chief information security officer? How do different states use that position and what do they do? And the fun thing with how we do the beginning of this with the ecosystem of cyber is we try and do this custom for each state. So Senator Hester and I have talked quite a few times and kind of some ideas on how we could do this. But for an example, in your state, is we could host a panel between some of the senators and delegates within your state, as well as the CISO, and talk about, hey, all the things we're talking about here today in this testimony, we could bring out there, invite more legislators in the conversation, and make sure that everybody understands why it's a big deal that we have to get behind these big ideas on how we can make the state more secure. And that's one exciting piece. The next one is talking about cybersecurity attacks, what they are, and really how they work. Oftentimes when we get that little notification that tells us to change our password every 30 days, all of us grin and groan and don't want to do it. But the biggest thing is that people are more motivated to actually change their password more often, because it is one of our big vulnerabilities that we have as an individual, when they actually understand how it works. So we have people from IBM, or even people on our own staff, our cyber education manager, Thomas Russell, talking about why you have to change your password, why it has to be a certain length. And it's giving you the description of how an 8-character password versus a 12-character password, what the major differences is and why you have to do that. As well as going into things like phishing and spear phishing, SIM swapping, misinformation, and giving you some best tips on how to help with those things. And then after we kind of level set to make sure people understand how that piece works, we get into the final portion, which is basically our 5 major things that we tell people to do, which is deploying multi-factor authentication, updating your software regularly, making your password strong, encrypting emails and files whenever possible, and then not clicking on things you shouldn't, i.e. phishing, backups, encryption, passwords, and MFA, things that all of us know and have been told over and over and over again, but we do it in an easy to use, kind of digestible format, and we give you toolkits to help with it. Next slide, please. Do we have time? This is only 30 seconds. If you guys want to see a quick preview, we can show this if it'll work. Otherwise, we can keep going. It's all good.
I can pull it up on YouTube.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
Thank you.
Do, do, do.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
So, and as you can see in that, there's a lot of different variations, different types of content, and different people from, from senators to departments of state. If you guys have ever watched Shark Tank, we even have, Robert Herjavec on there talking about why things like duped are so important. And it's been a great thing. Can you bring back up the slides for me, please? I can also talk to the last piece. It's okay. Oh, perfect. And then the next piece is going to be all about how it's delivered. So the biggest thing for all of you to know here today is there's 2 big pieces I want to cover as we finish this. The biggest thing is that we do this in 2 formats. All of you right now, if you're a legislator, you are welcome to sign up today and do it on demand at your own pace. I challenge all of you to get on there and check out some of the videos, give us feedback, give us thoughts. Like Senator Hester said, we're going to do a live training in every single state where we bring in people from the state to talk about the things going on in your community. The biggest thing that we do here is we try and plan it with the state and do it as best as possible. We've done this in 15 states so far. Next slide, please. And one of the biggest things we found in working with all these states is that the more relationships that we can create with the state around this idea of cybersecurity culture, the more exciting it gets and the more people get engaged in these topics. Montana was our very first one, and it was the one that we had the most lead up to in terms of training time. And so far, between their citizens and the legislators, they're already creating interesting conversations, just like the ones that you guys are having here today, which is helping us to make the country infinitely more secure than it was before. And like I said, throughout the summer, we're going to be creating additional content, things like, shorter 15-minute case studies on an interesting topic, diving in on specific topics maybe related to the colonial pipeline or phishing or different things to kind of expand on the information that we're already giving you. And then the fun thing is that this fall for Cyber Awareness Month, all the training that we're doing here and the things that all of you will be a part of, this will all be free and open to the public. So the design is that by the end of the year, whether it's a school district or a city official, this will be something that anybody can use, take, and learn from to make all of our communities safer as well. So last slide, please. And like I said before, all of you can get involved right now. This is all free and available online. We had a very generous sponsorship from Google to allow us to create all of this content. And so it's there for all of you as legislators and staff to go and use. And we welcome feedback. We welcome thoughts. If you have an experience you want to share, let us know. We're happy to put on the platform and let other people talk about it. But it's an exciting effort. We're happy to be doing it. Would love to hear you guys' thoughts and questions. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Forrest. And I think in terms of next steps, having a conversation with my co-chair, Pat Young and Chip Stewart about the Maryland version of the video. I'd also like to create a competition between the House and the Senate. See how many people we can get taking the training before the fall.
Oh, I see.
Love it.
Yeah. Does anybody, Ricky is laughing. You're Senate staff, Ricky, so I will be expecting you to take the training.
Oh yeah, I'll take it.
Does anybody?
Oh, we'll take it. Oh, we'll take it.
And it's not numbers of delegates, Mr. Chair. It's percentage of delegates and percentage of senators.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, okay. Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no way we could win.
We'll work out the terms of the.
Okay. You're our closeout speaker for us. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for finishing strong. Definitely to be continued. I look forward to our next steps together. This was kind of just a tee up to advertise what we're going to be doing together. I just want to quickly just recap. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. I want to thank the staff, Ricky, Erica, and Ham. Thank you so much for putting this together. I want to thank all of our excellent speakers. We heard from Frank Kappa at CSEA. We heard from the Secretary, Leahy and Chip Stewart. We heard from the equivalent secretary in Vermont. We had a presentation from MML and in a specific city. We also heard from the MSDE and Baltimore County. And then we wound up with Brian Dykstra from and also Forrest. So I just want to thank you all. I think we've learned a lot. I'm obviously tired and forgetting things, but I really appreciate we've learned a lot, and we'll be communicating some of what we learned, over social media. And of course, the entire YouTube will be posted on the MGA website. So with that, I'm going to move for adjournment.
Second.
Thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.